Hello, Looney listeners. You're listening to Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. This is episode 30, and this episode we will be reviewing Spider-Man numbers 22 and 23 in our classic run. And we also have a special guest with us this episode. So sit back, relax, grab your issues out, and get your conchu on. Hello, Loonies. It's Ray again, your High Priest of Khonshu. I am here to take the steering wheel for this episode. Unfortunately, our other High Priest Khonshu is away for this episode, so hoping to have him back next coming up episode. But as mentioned in one of our newsletters and from last week, we actually have a special guest this episode. So we are very happy to have Chris from Defenders TV podcast. Hi Chris, how are you?
What's up guys? Thank you very much for having me on board.
Yeah, it's look, I'm bloody stoked to actually have Chris on. It's a milestone, I think, for Into the Night podcast in the fact that Chris is our first live guest. Not only that as well, but you know, being a massive fan of Defenders TV podcast, having listened to them over the years, covering everything from Daredevil to all the Marvel movies. It's just pretty cool and pretty surreal actually having one of the Defenders guys over on the podcast. So thank you, Chris. Thank you for joining us, and I'm hoping you're ready for our foray into Moon Knight, but also one of your faves, Spider-Man.
I've been actually looking forward to this as well. I will try my best to keep the listeners from falling asleep. I've been told my monotone voice can sometimes drift people away. But more importantly, I'm looking forward to obviously. Those who don't know me, I'm Chris. I'm one of 3 hosts on Defenders TV podcast. We are basically the pinnacle of MCU Netflix reviews. So every episode of Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, The Defenders, Iron Fist, and Daredevil, we run through episode by episode. We break it down, and then we let people know whether we defend each episode and the overall series. But as you said, we've also done the MCU, the actual MCU films. So yeah, we're high up there, and it has been a number of years, but it's definitely been a fun journey. I'm looking forward to this podcast, obviously, because we get to talk about my favourite superhero, which is Spider-Man, and I'm going to talk at length about Spider-Man. And then, of course, we also have Moon Knight, which I will hold my hand up and say probably until... he was a cursory character in my wheelhouse, if you want to call it that, for a long time. I knew who he was. I always considered him the Batman of the Marvel universe.
Oh, no.
I know. I've learned more now.
Yeah.
I've learned more since listening to you guys and kind of being into the Night group. Because I do lurk in there. I don't post very much, but I lurk in there and I look at what you guys chat about. And I've learned a lot more. But I'm hoping that through this episode you can school me in why he's really not Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, look, more than happy to take you through some of Moon Knight's other finer qualities as well. But look, hang on, just taking it back a little bit. You mentioned about your dulcet tones being quite soothing. I think we might be in a bit of trouble here, Chris, because I think I mentioned to you earlier, or Connor, I have an uncanny ability to kind of make people yawn. I'm not proud of it by any means, and I actually make a little game of it myself. I love to talk to people, and I love to pick it when they yawn. You know, when they yawn with their mouth closed. I find that hilarious. But anyway, needless to say, I've seen it many a time. So look, Loonies, I hope I'm not drifting you off to sleep. We have a very cool guest with us today, and I can't wait to crack into it as well. Speaking about Defenders and being around for so long, Chris, just a couple of highlights that just come into my mind from listening to you guys for so long. Look, I always associate, listen to you guys in particular scenarios, right? So I actually remember the house that we lived at before where we are now. I remember actually walking around. It was around kind of like a bushland nature. I remember many a fine walk in the national park, listening to the Defenders TV podcast, listening to you guys, and listening to Daredevil season 1. Quite fond memories. You also had a fourth host on as well, right? Was her name Irene, or did I get that right?
Yeah, we had a fourth host. It was Irene, yeah.
Yeah. She was great as well. What happened? She wasn't podcasting, wasn't her thing, or
No, it wasn't even that. It was just, it's the usual life. Life gets in the way. For those who actually podcast, and you'll be able to attest to this, just sometimes finding time, because none of us do this. We do this for the love. We do this for the passion of, be it the Marvel Universe, or in particular one character, etc. So finding time and fitting your standard life around that time can get difficult. We're all still great friends. We all hang out. It's just the guys and I have a bit more free time. So she just unfortunately couldn't. But we've talked every now and again, and we're considering. She's thinking about how we can get her back for the odd episode if possible. Cool. At the moment, yes, it's just the 3 Defenders.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe we'll have a crossover where it would be the 5 Defenders with you guys.
Oh, yeah.
But Moon Knight wasn't a Defender, was he? No, so that's not going to work.
He wasn't. But we just recently covered the Defenders, the old iteration of the Defenders back in the 70s, and Moon Knight had quite a big role in a big arc that they had as well. I think it spanned from issues 47 to 50 or 51. So Moon Knight was your kind of unofficial defender in that scenario. So yeah, you can kind of loosely connect him to it.
Okay, we'll go the Defenders and then the unofficial 2 other Defenders.
Yeah.
I don't know how good it will be to call you the unofficial title Defenders, but yeah, we can try it. Someone will let us away with it.
Yeah, it doesn't help our cause for sure. But yeah, no, I mean, as you say, I'd love to hear Irene back as well. You guys had a great rapport with her. Obviously, the 3 of you now are rock solid and awesome. Over, what is it? Is it over 250 or 300 episodes, including Gotham, right?
Yeah, so I'm actually not part of the Gotham. More just because I've never been a huge DC fan. I do.
Yeah, me too.
I watch all the DC films. Mm-hmm. I still love The Flash. I watch The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow when I can. Arrow, I dip in and out of. I'll always watch the DCEU, although that's a mess of a universe at the moment.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Especially yesterday, news broke. I think it was yesterday, the day before, that Josh Whedon has pulled out of Batman, or Batgirl, I should say.
Batgirl, yeah.
Which that's terrible news for that. But he was pretty much open and honest, and he went, I didn't have a story.
Well,
and I'm like, well, it's better than building something and filming something that was going to be another terrible kind of mess.
Exactly. You don't want to have Joss Whedon cornered somewhere and just feeling like, he has to churn something out just for the sake of it. I think I read also...
Definitely not.
Yeah, I think Gail Simone, I think she said that she'd be interested in maybe writing something for Batgirl, the movie, so a bit of hope.
But it's a bit of hope, but I think the long and the short is that there's a lot of work to be done there when you put it in comparison to the 10 plus years of the MCU. But they each have different qualities. Some of them have more recognizable superheroes than others. Because you could argue that Superman is a lot bigger of a superhero from a pop culture piece than the Spider-Man or the Iron Man. Say Iron Man to Spider-Man. Like they're completely different. They're different in terms of pop culture reference. And if you go to everyone, if we had said less than 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, to someone, okay, you're going to go see Iron Man, you're going to love him, you're going to want him in every film, over Superman, people would have been like,
oh, exactly.
what are you talking about? Who is this person?
Yeah.
I do hope they get it, but Gotham, sorry, our listeners, the Loonies should actually know by now, if they don't actually know about my style, is I like tangents.
Yeah.
So basically, we've just spoken for a tangent of about 5 minutes. I'm going to bring it all the way back going, yeah, I watched the first season of Gotham, and then I'm so far behind the guys, it's just like, it never made sense for me to come in. I come into the odd Gotham podcast where we do the movie reviews.
Yeah.
When the guys want, but mostly at the moment I stick on the Marvel side of the house. But yeah, I think together we're over 300.
Wow.
We've got an umbrella. If anyone just likes all the umbrella kind of things, we have TV podcast industries. Sorry, podcast TV industries. Where you have your Gotham. We had the Hannibal TV show one, if anyone likes that. John and Irene did a lovely rendition and breakdown of that show. And then we obviously have all the MCU and the Netflix ones through Defenders.
It's a massive catalogue, and for any loonies that haven't, actually have watched all the TV shows and would like a review, an in-depth review of each episode, I cannot recommend enough to go check out Defenders TV podcast and Gotham as well. Look, I'm not really a DC person myself as well, Chris. It's just happened to be, I guess, circumstance. I think I started with Marvel, and there was just so much in there. It's kind of like, for me, it's kind of like classical music and jazz music, right? You either do one or the other, because it takes a whole lifetime to actually know and love one, and let alone try to get the other one. So I'm trying to get into Batman, but I just can't. I mean, I really like the Tom King thing, but there's just so many titles out there, so I can't. You've got to kind of ration your funds. So
exactly, and the thing I find, back in the day when we were kids, we could, we didn't have to worry about rent or mortgages or anything like that. It was pocket money, great. Okay, I need to buy sweets and comic books.
Yeah,
that's it. Now, obviously, speaking of as an old fat kid, I used to probably put more money towards sweets, but I've learned to kind of ration it out towards more comic books then. But now, so it's one of the reasons I love. I used to collect every issue I could. I have, back in my my parents' house, I should say, I've got, the big trays, where you would put the single issue catalogs. I've got about 6 or 7 of them.
Like the long boxes?
Just with all my old, the long boxes.
Oh, wow.
Just 6 or 7 of them, just of everything I used to collect as a kid.
That's awesome.
And then, as I started going to college, I didn't have space, so I went into the trade paperbacks, just the graphic novels. I still have, and then I kind of keep them because they're the ones I want, but then I just went digital because space was an issue. It's become a big thing now. When I can, I'll pick up the single issues if it's something special, like Damnation, or some of the big events that I really want. But other than that, I go digital. But the issue with the digital is a lot of them sometimes don't go day and date. They don't go day and date. So when someone actually releases the single issue to the comic book shop, you may not get that issue on the digital, I'll say like Comixology or Marvel Unlimited on the exact same day. You may have to wait 24 hours or sometimes 48.
Yeah.
So that's a huge annoyance for me.
Yeah, and especially with, I think, social media and stuff, the impetus to actually get your books on time is quite important these days, because if you go on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you've immediately got discussions, and you don't want to be left out. And that's what I find with comics, is that you've really got to have your finger on the pulse, because for titles that you like, because if you don't, then either something will be spoiled or that you kind of feel left behind. So totally agree with you with digitals. The way I tackle it is stuff like like Moon Knight. The ones that you really do make a concerted effort to collect. Like for instance, like with floppies and singles, I'd pick that, like Moon Knight, Damnation, the big series is, of course, I do that as well. And the titles which you kind of love, but you're kind of on the fence. I always go for the digitals. But what I have is a secret clause after that, a little separate clause going, okay, well, if I really enjoyed the digital, okay, then I'm going to buy this in trade. So you end up buying it twice, and it kind of gets you every time. But sometimes you read a digital and it kind of fizzes. Look, just we're talking about tangents. Here's another tangent for you. I'm just recently rereading Inhumans, The Once and Future Kings by Christopher Priest. And I just recently got the final issue. It's a 5-part mini, right? And it's just because other things got in the way, so I said, I won't get the last issue. I finally got the last issue. I've reread the whole thing again, and I'm going, man, this is good. Reading back to back, it's a really compelling story. I wasn't too impressed when I read it month to month, but it's like, man, this is good, all in a row. So I'm playing with the idea of actually, there's a cat. Playing with the idea of buying the thing. So it's comic collecting is a funny thing, I must say.
And I'll raise my hand and say the odd time I have, if I can't find a back issue on Marvel Unlimited or Comixology or DC's version, the online version, I will go down the torrent route, the old PDF route, and that's really only because I think a lot of us do it. But I have similar to you. I have a clause which is, as soon as I'll go to my local comic book shop in Dublin, and I'll ask them to try and pick me up a hardback version or a trade paperback version or any version they can of. So I always put back into either the comic book shop or the overall ecosystem. But it's getting harder because... So I'll give you an example. There's a fantastic DC... Actually, this is one of my actual only DC. There was the Starman it was a comic book from the 90s, around then, and it was one of the first reinventions of one of the old Silver Age heroes called Starman. It's about his son, Jack Knight, who takes over, and it was this really dark version of kind of Star City and all these amazing things. I'm just going to pull up who did it again, because I feel terrible for not remembering who it was.
Oh, look, I'm, while you're looking that up, I'm really terrible with DC. Star City, is that where the Flash is? No.
Okay. I think so.
Okay.
Let me just pull it up now. So his dad was a member of the GSA, which is the Justice Society of America, but it was done by Publication History. Oh, come on! Just tell me who actually created. James Robinson and Tony Harris. There we go. It was a good thing. It was 2009, 1994. There we are.
Wow. Okay.
So 1994, Jack Knight. It was a really good piece, and I'd recommend a few people looking at the overall run. It was fantastic. It ended quite abruptly because they cancelled them basically, but it was a nice one where there's sex, there's drugs, there's rock and roll, and it was one of those first comic books to do that. They reinvented Solomon Grundy, a lot of those things, but it was one of those ones where, anyway, to go back to the tangent. The reason I bring this guy up is I started buying the hardback collections. So I started, because I read this as a kid. I can't remember. I think it was someone gave it to me as a kid, and I started reading it, and then this is about a year and a half ago. I remembered it. I want to reread that, so I went to my comic book shop, and they couldn't get it for me. they just couldn't. They couldn't. There was no back issue. So then I went online and I managed to get collections 1, 2, 3, and 5. And I nowhere, not eBay, not Amazon, nowhere could get me collection number 4. And so that one I had to go, okay, I'm going to torrent this one. Just because I can't go 1, 2, 3.
Of course.
Not know what happens in the 4 collection and then jump straight to 5.
That would frustrate me as well, yeah. Yeah. And so, okay, so you torrented, okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I torrented that, and then my local comic book shop basically managed to go, after about 6 months, goes, oh my god, we got this for you. And I'm like, great. So I just bought it. Now I have the collection of them.
Oh,
and I feel better, but it just that whole...
Yeah.
There was a point in me where I'm like, I'm not going to wait and not read 5. I was like,
yeah.
But anyway, I put back into the ecosystem, what I'm trying to say.
Well, that's it. Yeah, it's very important to put back into the ecosystem as well. And look, I think any comic collector would be lying if they said that they haven't dipped their toe into having to resort to that, you know, because everyone has their white whale, you know. Mine would be, you know, there are a few. Everyone's got them few, you know. Like I love my Valiant comics as well, and I'm collecting the hardcover Valiant deluxe editions. They look really beautiful, Chris, on the shelf. You know, it's a really stunning piece. But there's Volume 1 of Archer and Armstrong and Volume 1 of Bloodshot, which are really hard to find. You know, they're going for like $400 on eBay. So I'm not that keen to impart.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not that keen to spend that much on it. But they are kind of my white whales. So everyone's got one. Everyone's got them. But it's good to hear that you managed to find Starman, because that sounds like a very obscure trade collection, you know. And everyone has that, you know. Everyone has.
Oh, it was.
Yeah, everyone has those stories that kind of veer away from the mainstream, but you somehow connect to it, and it starts becoming quite an important volume to have, you know, if you're a collector. So, yeah. Heading back towards Defenders TV podcasts as well, what I always wanted to know as well, Chris, was like how do you know Derek and John? Like, how do you guys come about, and Irene as well? I guess, how did the whole thing kind of start? Did someone have a podcast first, and everyone went, okay, that's pretty cool, or did you all have one, or how did it happen?
So Derek and I used to work together in a company, in our day jobs, in our alternate personas, or if you want to call it that. So we worked together for years, and we were just good friends, and that's how I knew the three, John and Irene as well, through Derek. Myself and John then became good friends as well. Mm-hmm. The boys had Gotham. When we found out about Daredevil starting, and they just kind of, myself and Derek had been friends and shared comic books and nerdy discussions and everything for so long that they said, hey, we do this Gotham one. I knew about Gotham, I'd listened to it, and it was one of the first subscribers on the podcast, and then went, sure, yeah, let's do it. They knew. So the one good thing I have is a crazy, stupid, encyclopedic knowledge of useless information about the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, excellent.
Like Psylocke's brother and
yes.
is actually Captain Britain, blah, blah, blah.
Awesome character.
All these little things.
Yeah.
And that's where it kind of came up, and that's how we kind of, we did one... we all did, like, we did one recording, and after that it was like, yeah, no, this is great. And then the initial was kind of like, okay, let's just see how Daredevil goes, and take it from there. And we did the Daredevil bug, and it bit us. And since then, it's over 120, 130.
Yeah, it's up to 130 something.
I think we're I think we just recorded 133, and that's been. And we're just waiting now for Jessica Jones season 2. Yeah. And then we have Luke Cage season 2.
Yeah. So no one was because I know just from speaking with the guys as well, and like, so you're a Spidey fan. Derek's a very big Nick Fury Agents of Shields fan, and John's we all know is a Doctor Strange fan as well. So no one was like a huge Daredevil fan, or was it just the fact that Netflix was kind of touting this new series that kind of generated this enthusiasm to focus on Netflix shows, or yeah.
So I wouldn't call myself a huge Daredevil fan. I am a Daredevil fan, especially since the Kevin Smith run. So one of my favorite directors, producers, writers is Kevin Smith, and he did a fantastic run on Daredevil. And then Spider-Man and Daredevil have quite a sordid history of back and forth and tie-ins and so forth. So I would frequently dip into that Hell's Kitchen universe. And then that was kind of, for me, let's do this, because I do know enough about the Kingpin and the other... the obscure guys like the Gladiator.
Yes, Melvin Potter,
who was in season 1 cameo. Yeah. So it was all those. It was just kind of all made sense. If they had said, "Hey, we're doing a Spider-Man Marvel Netflix show," I'd be like, that's a no-brainer. But Daredevil was kind of like, hey, it's close enough. Let's do this.
Can I say then? What if the first Netflix show was Moon Knight? Would you be just as interested, or
just as interested? But it would just take me a lot more. I'd be like, okay, now I have a lot more back issue reading to do, because as I was saying to you before we started the podcast, it was kind of like, my knowledge here is underwhelming for me. As I said, I knew him in the fringes, and I say it as a joke to the loonies. He was, for me, the Batman of the Marvel universe, because he had a flying moon.
Of course,
he was a billionaire. All these things. I know there is a lot more ever since kind of listening to you guys, and also from listening to you guys and from being in the group, learning these and things like that. But I would have just been into it as much, probably slightly just with more. Oh God, I need to learn so much more about this character. But since go ahead.
Oh, look, admit So sorry, I mean just admittedly, Daredevil has a higher profile than Moon Knight, of course. So, you speak to anyone that has any inkling with comic book collecting, and they mention Daredevil, and then they mention Moon Knight. Obviously, Daredevil's like the bigger, the higher tier character for sure.
Yeah, but I think Moon Knight has picked up in. Now, again, I don't know if this is actually true, but in my social sphere, and I think it's probably because you guys are in it, the fact that in my head now Moon Knight has become a larger character in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, actually, could that just be all you guys talking about him so often? But let's not say that. Let's say that actually, in the last few years, he has come up in the world, or in the comic book world, as and I actually think it is true. I think he was always a bit of a B C lister, and he wouldn't get as many runs, but the character has evolved so much, and they've had some fantastic writers on that. I think a lot of guys are coming in now going, well, we can do a lot with this character. They don't need to play it as safe as they would with some of the other larger characters. He is a bit of a lonely island, or lone island, I should say, in that you could do a lot of crazy stuff with the run that you're writing, and it won't affect Civil War 2, the overall event, if you know what I mean. He can be in it. I think he was in. He was in Civil War 1? He was
Civil War 1. He tied into it. I don't know about the core books, but his run at that time was heavily tied into it as well. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So, but it's just also like you can get away with like bringing the Egyptian gods in, and no one goes, well, no.
Yeah, look, I think you hit it absolutely on the head there, in the fact that that there have been a slew of really good writers and artists, and it's almost become, like, the Loonies probably know this, it's almost become a fact that, and he's so detached that it's become a bit of a nice little sandbox for writers and artists, because it's so detached from the Marvel Universe. You can go at it, basically. You can go to town with Moon Knight, and that's what you see with... been fortunate enough to have some really good writers like Brian Michael Bendis, Charlie Houston as well, Warren Ellis, Cullen Bunn. Recently, I'd say from about the mid-2000s onwards, Moon Knight's been pretty lucky to have a really, really cool creative teams which take him in different directions. Like, the downside of that is that every time you get the new creative team, it seems they seem to reinvent Moon Knight. Well, you could argue that they add to his canon, but like we're finding out with Bemis and Burroughs now, the current run, which is Volume 9 of Moon Knight, very different from Lemire's run, which has been absolutely stellar, the previous run before. So it kind of rubs some loonies up the wrong way, and I can see why, because you want some sort of consistency, or you'd want some sort of faithfulness to the Moon Knight legend, but writers have this flexibility to actually just do what they want. So I think there's pros and cons for both, and I think that's what makes Moon Knight really, really special to have on board. So look, I just also wanted to ask as well, just about podcasting, right? So you say that you met up with, you worked with Derek, and became friends through work, and you found out this whole podcasting thing. So was Derek the impetus then of podcasting? Was there any background with radio work from any of you guys? How was it? Was it just a bit of fun because you guys loved discussing it, that you thought, hey, this is pretty cool? Why not just So
it was a bit of both. So in my previous life before my current job, I was PR, so I had done interview, radio training, etc. And also, as my mother says, I could talk to a stone wall, and if it would talk back to me. For me, talking has never been an issue. So I'm always happy with that. Then I personally ran a blog, or I still do, I should say, with some friends of mine. So that has involved radio interviews in Ireland. So we've done that, which is just as easy. And then Derek and John, as I said, they were running Gotham, and they asked, do we want to do this one for Daredevil? And it just kind of flowed from that very much. There was an element of, we talk about, like, when we would go over, myself and my girlfriend, or now fiance, back then girlfriend, would go over and to Derek and John's, and we would talk about, like, we'd end up having these 30-40 minute conversations.
Yep.
Where having a blank-faced look on my girlfriend's face, she's not really into comic books.
Well, that's what I was
we'd have this conversation about, like, why the Secret Avengers is just as good as some of the other ones, and why that comic book run was terrible, or why this character could beat up that character. Those kind of conversations. So
look, I think
it was always a good one.
Yeah, I see a lot of similarities here, Chris, with myself and yourself and your fiance. That kind of rings true from what you say as well. I was about to ask, is she into comics as well? But clearly not. One of the
Although
funny...
she likes Jessica Jones now, thanks to Kristen Ritter. She loves Jessica Jones.
Well, I think that's a great thing about Netflix as well. And especially Jessica Jones, it's not your typical superhero-y kind of thing that, there's not capes flying and stuff. And I've heard many stories of people who aren't comic book fans, or who just like, watching good TV and are really invested in something like Jessica Jones because it's just good, solid drama, I was about to say, because like my partner Eve as well, look, she's absolutely nothing she's not into comics at all as well. We were watching Black Panther. Surprising, like I managed to get her to watch Black Panther with me, which she really loved as well. She really enjoyed. But one of the trailers was Infinity War, and it had, you've probably seen the trailer or the teaser for it, and it had all that stuff.
100%, yeah. She
saw Benedict Cumberbatch, and she turned to me and she goes, "Oh, I didn't know Sherlock was part of the Marvel Universe." And I was like, no. No, it's Benedict Cumberbatch, but no, remember we watched Doctor Strange? He's a different guy. Oh, okay. So, I share your sentiments with partners. So,
it gets hard sometimes when you're trying to get them to, no, trust me, this is a really good show. And
yeah. Well, she really,
But using like Punisher, I've managed to get certain people into the Netflix piece because of the Punisher.
Yeah.
Which is just basically an espionage thriller.
With
very little, and then you then take Daredevil, which is crime, and then ninjas, and then you have Iron Fist, which is
a bit more.
Iron Fist. I'm sorry, John. It wasn't the world's best series, but it will get better. Trust me.
It will be.
It had some rays of sunshine, but it will get better.
Oh, look, I think they're going to learn massively from Season 1, and I think I'm actually really looking forward to Season 2 for Iron Fist, which I know they're in production at the moment, and I just can't wait for it, because I think they will have learnt a lot from it, from the first, kind of gauging what fans are expecting, so definitely looking forward to all of that. Look, we better get soon onto our comic book reviews on Marvel. On Moon Knight as well. Look, just a couple of quick fire questions then, Chris, as well. So
go first.
Okay, of all the released film and TV iterations of comic book characters at the moment, who would you? What would be the summit of what would be your favourite adaptation so far? Could be TV or movies.
Okay, so the number one for me at the moment is still Homecoming, Spider-Man Homecoming. Be that because he is one of my favourite characters of all time. It is very similar to the Brian Bendis run of Ultimate Spider-Man, which is one of the best reimaginings of the character in a long time. He brought him, the thing about Spider-Man, he's the everyman, but not, if you know what I mean. He's the geek that a lot of us kind of associate with being as a child, but he's got the super intelligence. But yeah, he's also, when he gets in a tight spot, he becomes quippy. So I really enjoyed the Homecoming run. I really enjoyed bringing him into the MCU. There were some elements of it which was like, ugh, but overall, that would still be my epitome. Of course, Civil War, of course, Winter Soldier. They are fantastic. Black Panther, for a host of reasons, is amazing. But I would, if I'm being true to myself and not worrying about numberings and reasonings of why one is better than the other, I'd always go home. Spider-Man is top.
Yeah. It's definitely a nice little warm feeling, I think, when I watched it as well. Tom Holland was fantastic in it. I definitely like Winter Soldier as well. I think that was really good. Civil War, I really do enjoy. And Black Panther, as you mentioned, it's funny. It's one of those recent Marvel films that I'm kind of really wanting to see again. Like, are you wanting to see it again as well, or are you happy with what you saw? And yeah.
No, I'm dying to rewatch it. It's going to be one of those. So we, for anyone who really wants a really in-depth review,
yes,
we did our film review. Go over to Defenders TV podcast. And
that was fantastic.
The last episodes,
is
our review. But there is, the more and more I've been thinking about it, and anyone who's on the internet knows that there has been. This has been a tough one, which is there's culture, there's race, and there's a lot of other things thrown into this to this film, and against this film. I wanted to actually see, the reason I want to see it again, and this is the truth, is how much of the external. I love the film. I should put that down there. How much of the film and my love of the film was instigated by external pressures, and I don't think anything was. I think it was just a perfect storm of really good writing, really good direction. Is there some imperfections? Yes, but like there's enough. There's one of the best MCU villains, in my opinion, is in this film because of his rationale, his reasoning, and the reason he wants to do what he does. But I want to see if any of that. So I probably will go again quite soon. But it's just the when.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because life gets in the way.
Of course. And I think I know where you're coming from as well. Like, the risk of sounding, half, I don't know, controversial or whatever. Look, I love Black Panther as well. I do wonder exactly with you about, how much was it influenced from external factors of social depiction and all that. It was a very solid film. It was fantastic. I think as well. I think it could have done without the massive amount of hype for it. It got a massive amount of hype, which is deserved. But like what it does when you do hype and overhype something is that you do raise expectations from people going to see it, and if you do go in expecting the bee's knees of something because something is like, I got the same impression with remember the Blair Witch Project? I don't know when you remember when that came out. Yeah. And a lot of the detriment to that was because everyone kept on saying, "Oh my God, this is the scariest thing you'll ever see." So you walk into it thinking, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna be scared, I'm out of my bones, and then you get that disappointment because you've built it up so much because of this overhype. And I think, unfortunately, with Black Panther, there's a little bit of that as well. Totally agree with you about everything else. It's a very solid film. It's up there as well. I mean, I think I sent some comments to you guys as well saying it's hovering around the top 5 as well. It's not a perfect film by any means, but it's enough there to be an enjoyable. And look, my barometer is Eve as well, my partner, non-comic book kind of fan. She came out of it going, that was really cool. Like, she loved all the characters, and I was actually worried for her, and I felt that kind of marred a little bit of my experience because when you saw the flying jets and stuff go through Wakanda, I'm kind of there thinking, oh gosh, is Eve thinking, oh my gosh, this is such a out of the world thing. I was worried about how she'd think, what she'd think of it. Whereas I shouldn't have worried it at all, but because she enjoyed it, for what it was. She knew it was a sci-fi thing, and she didn't go, oh my God, that's so unbelievable. She loved the whole idea. So it was a very interesting thing. But so Black Panther, Loonies. If you want to hear a very good review, seriously, these guys over 2 hours or so, and it flew by. Don't get me wrong, Chris. It was really cool. My favorite bit out of it, and I think the Loonies would appreciate it. My favorite bit. Just keep an ear out for what Derek and Chris were talking about Bast, the Panther god, and the potential connection there between Egyptian gods and one of our good mates, Khonshu. So it leaves a little door there for all of us Moon Knight fans, and it's a really good review. So go check it out at Defenders TV podcast. A couple other things, Chris, quickly. The Spidey films. We know you love Homecoming. In a nutshell, what do you reckon of the Andy Garfield ones? And what do you think of the Tobey Maguire ones? Did you love them?
Okay, so quick fire. Tobey Maguire was one of the first. And back in the day, we didn't have much. We had a very campy Batman in terms of kind of the George Clooney, the Val Kilmers. It was a camped comic book universe. So this was one of the Sony's first attempts, and Tobey Maguire kind of did right then epitomise what we saw as Peter Parker from the comic books, and it was spectacular for its day. Back then we didn't have much of that, so seeing Spider-Man rushing through the city was just amazing. I prefer, if I have to, I go Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man, and then Spider-Man 3 for that. Spider-Man 3 is a bit of a mess of a film.
Yeah.
But it was supposed to be a two-parter. They crammed everything in. There was a lot in that, and if you want to read about it, look it up. There's a Comedy of Errors article about the truth behind that production. And it wasn't trusted. There was going to be a Spider-Man 4.
Yes.
But then they cancelled it, etc.
Raimi wanted the Vulture, right? That's what I heard. He wanted the Vulture in the fourth, and Sony said no, and he said, okay, well, that's it then. Is that right?
Well, there's a bit more to it as well, which is Tobey Maguire was not happy with the reception of number 3. He was getting older. They didn't know... Raimi, there was a lot of tension post number 3 between Raimi and Sony, the executives, because they forced a lot of the reshoots. There was huge amounts of reshoots in that. Yeah. They forced the additional, some of the additional villains. They forced the Goblin. Who was it? Oh my God,
Harry Osborn.
DeFranco.
Yeah, DeFranco.
But DeFranco. They forced him coming in as that villain already, and then the changes. There's a lot. It's a comedy of errors.
Yeah.
But because of the reception, they decided, forget about this. We're going to reboot, and that's how we got Garfield.
Okay. And Garfield wasn't was that your cup of tea? How did you find Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2?
Okay, so 1, it was good.
I liked 1 as well.
It's a solid kind of. He's again a different take. He's a millennial take on Spider-Man.
It was a bit slower, I thought.
Yes, it was what 2. It was one of the first ones. Was like 2 hours 15, I think, or something. 2:20 maybe.
Yeah,
it was a long film. I remember that. But they wanted to set up the world. And I enjoyed it. Like, it was... I actually watched it recently on Netflix. Just for shits and giggles kind of thing. Just kind of wanted to start getting back into it.
Yeah.
And it's actually... Okay, he's a broody, cry Spider-Man in much of the way that Tobey Maguire cries, and there's that meme of it online.
Yeah.
He's a bit more whingy. But then the quips he does do... So if we remember, there's that scene in number 1 where he's... There's that scene in number 1 where he is in the
with the car thief. Yeah,
exactly. And he's just going, "Oh no, don't knives, my worst enemy. Please don't." Like, that is a very Spider-Man moment. So that's I number 2 is a shambles.
Yeah,
it's a shambles of a film.
I agree. Like, Amazing Spider-Man was... I enjoyed it. To me, it took a little bit to get used to with the pacing, because it was different from the Sam Raimi ones. I'm a big Sam Raimi fan, like Evil Dead.
Amazing.
God, countless times I've watched that trilogy over and over. I love Evil Dead 2, obviously, and Army of Darkness. Me and my mates always quote from it, so we love it. So, but... Mark Webb's version was a lot slower, and I agree. Second one, although you had the likes of Jamie Foxx and stuff, and you had the Rhino, Paul, was it Giamatti? As a Rhino. Oh gosh, I bought that on Blu-ray, and unfortunately, I hate to say it, I tried to watch it and I couldn't. I had to stop. I just lost interest in it. I think the pacing and the storytelling was a little off. Let alone the Goblin in that as well. Tying it back to the Goblin though, Chris, I thought one of the shining things with Spider-Man 3, and funny that you mentioned that bringing back Harry Osborn, the Goblin in it. What I thought was really fun about Spider-Man 3 was the team up, because when I grew up collecting Spider-Man, a lot of it was about guest appearances and team-ups with someone to beat a villain, So I was going to ask you next as to what would you, if you could cast back into the plethora of Spider-Man stories that you've read, what would be your favourite Spider-Man team-up, and who would that be? Like, would it be the Punisher? He's had many times with the Punisher, many encounters with the Punisher. There's a big one with Moon Knight, the Sidekick's Revenge, round robin, which I'd love to get you guys. I'd love to get you back on it, because that's a fantastic arc with Moon Knight and Spider-Man. But you got your Spider-Man Deadpool as well. I remember Web of Spider-Man with a Hulk. So who would you rate as a nice team up?
Okay, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to take the into the Spideyverse, that event. Which is basically Spider-Man from across the multiverse. It's all just different Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good call.
But the reason I do this is because it gave us Spidey-Gwen.
Yes.
The Spidey-Gwen was spun directly out of this, which is a Elseworlds not Elseworlds, but a multiverse. I'm talking DC there for a second. It's a multiverse parallel version of Spider-Man where Gwen Stacy became Spider-Man. Or Spider-Gwen, I should say this. And it's fantastic. They did it as a once-off. Everyone loved it. And now it's become its own thing. And I'm a huge fan of her. But then you had Silk in it. They brought back the Ultimate Spider-Man, or I should say in this case the Miles Morales, the second Ultimate Spider-Man, the Miles Morales version. Again, who I love. And I say, okay, so that's my cheat. That's the one I do love. But then if I have to be true to it, I'd say the Deadpool Spider-Man team-ups are always fantastic. Like the some of the latest runs, which is Don't Call This a Team-Up, which is number 0 on the Deadpool Spider-Man collection. Fantastic. And I have a huge soft spot for Daniel Way when he wrote for Deadpool, because it was very wisecracking, very rude, very kind of... Well, if you like Ryan Reynolds, you'll like the Daniel Way runs of Deadpool.
Yeah. I think it's funny, because I think with Deadpool, he's the only character that can really, with Spider-Man being all quippy and using it as his kind of technique to kind of disorientate criminals and stuff, I think the only character that can one-up him on just absurdity would be Deadpool. So, so I really enjoyed the... exactly. Spider-Man, Deadpool... That series, I started collecting that. I dropped off, but they're very, very fun together. So I'd agree with that as well. Right. Okay. Well, before we get into more Spider-Man and Moon Knight, loonies, I hope you're still with us. We are getting to Moon Knight. I just want to quickly go through some news articles that we have this week. Okay, so the first one is obviously the big one. The Marvel May solicitations in 2018. We have an insight into Moon Knight 195, which has another cover by Becky Cloonan and a Deadpool, funnily enough, variant cover by Greg Smallwood. And it says again, I found this hilarious. It said beware the collective. So. Loonies, I'm not sure. We've kind of dropped it at the moment. The Defenders TV podcast and Moon Knight Into the Night podcast and a few others were all part of this podcast network called the Collective. So, anyway, in issue 195, Moon Knight goes up against the Collective. So that's pretty cool. We get a bit of a splash on Becky Cloonan's art, which looks really cool. The Collective looks like some sort of multi-limbed, who knows, demonic kind of entity, and seems to be causing Moon Knight a lot of trouble. So that's been released. On top of that as well, a bit of exciting news. In May, so in the May solicitations, it's been also announced that the Jeff Lemire run will be released in its entirety in hardcover format. So that's definitely one for the shelves. And Chris, if you've got an extra, what's that, $35 just you got to fork that out. Go to your store and
I'm nodding along here, going, oh, I didn't know that's coming to me. Okay, that's on the pick.
That should be really cool. Have you read the Lemire run as well, or?
I partially read it back in the day.
Yeah.
I say back in the day, but I dropped in, I think, at the beginning in single issues, and then, I kind of wasn't clicking back then, but I know now that it's like, okay, I'm gonna go back to it because I know more about the character now.
Yeah, I think you really dig it, like reading issues 1 to 14 back to back, and having it in hardcover format. It's going to be great. I'm wondering about the bonus material. You know, with these releases, they usually release a few extra bits and pieces. So nothing's revealed at the moment from their description of it, but hopefully we'll get a few more extra bonus behind the scenes things. It'll be quite interesting. Greg Smallwood is fantastic as an artist, and again during Jeff Lemire's run, you have the brilliance of Francesco Francavilla, James Stokoe, who does a lot of sci-fi stuff, and Wilfredo Torres, who I think most recently did the Legion comic book series. So hardcover format, loonies, got to get into it. Get that Lemire edition. Another bit of internet trawling, I guess. I came across actually a very interesting article here, Chris. It was titled Legion versus Moon Knight, which has the better portrayal of mental illness. And I read this actually this afternoon, and it's actually quite insightful into the definitions of dissociative identity disorder and schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder. In a nutshell, basically, I hate to say it, but in the comics, they've depicted it all wrong. I mean, yeah. So in one thing, look, if I can just quickly cite something, it's got one of the later Bemis and Burroughs issues, and it has Mark Spector sitting cross-legged in Central Park, and then you see an old lady with a poodle walking in the background, and then you see Mark all of a sudden shouting at himself as if he's two separate identities. So he shouts out, I'm not a douche. Yes, you are. Yeah, stop whacking me. So he's actually obviously having an internal monologue, dialogue with himself. But apparently, with this disorder, dissociative identity disorder, they don't. They call them alters. Alters are people, the different personalities. And they actually, in reality, they don't emerge simultaneously to fight each other. So that's a bit of a misnomer, of depicting someone kind of, taking both sides and pretending that they're, Joe A and Joe B. It's purely a kind of a Hollywood thing. And similar with also with Legion, say, for instance, and they've cited a couple of old movie depictions, Eve and Sybil, which I think included Sally Field. Essentially, people with dissociative identity disorder, they haven't got fully formed identities within them. It's best described as they have fragments of a greater personality all together. So to have these really defined personalities within someone having multiple personality disorder is slightly misleading as well. And this article it's quite interesting to read. It also cites as well the issue of when they do go to psychologists and therapists, how there's the risk of suggestion from the psychologists. So basically, they've got you say under hypnosis. So say, Chris, you're on a couch somewhere, you're lying down and you're in a trance, and it's these prompts by the psychologists going, okay, well, is there someone else there, in the most base terms, is there someone else there with you? Like, is there someone else that is making you feel that way? And this article argues the fact that the patient generates that from the suggestion of the psychologist as well. So there's a lot of like truths unfurled, okay. I think. Yeah, with look, I'm no psychologist, I'm no mental expert as well. I'm just going off what I read from this article. But I thought it was very interesting in the fact that how it was depicted both in Legion and in Moon Knight, how it is depicted in the comics with how it is actually, in reality. And yeah, there's still a little bit of a difference there. So it's certainly a lot more fun to think that you have different personalities, like your Jake Lockley, your Mark Spector, arguing. But I'm just trying to give a sense of reality here, Chris. I'm trying to bring it down and
well, probably... actually, if anyone, I'm actually quite a fan of. Have you guys seen the James McAvoy film Split?
I want to see that. That looks really cool. Yeah, no.
Okay, so I'll tell the loonies who haven't have a check out that. Check that out, because that's very much obviously split personalities. Have a look. It's part of the Unbreakable universe, so that will give you an idea or a sense of what it is. But check it out. I think that one's a lot more truthful to what kind of DID is. I say that now, but obviously at the end of it you'll understand why I'm going like, well, maybe not.
Yeah.
But okay. At the beginning it is. But I do love, like, yeah, it's hard to depict probably DID in a way, because if you do it in the way that it probably psychologically is true, in reality, it doesn't make the best reading or writing. Whereas if you have a Mark Spector sitting in a green field, yelling at himself, having a three-way conversation, well, that makes it more fun.
Yeah.
The one thing I always forgot, though, and I never understood, we can get to this later on, which is in some of the later Legion, which I do love. I love Legion as a character. They have the so that you know who is talking at any individual point. They'll have different font or different colors of font per character. Yeah. So when they have these three-way or two-way conversations, one would be blue, one would be red, or one would be a different kind of style font versus the other. So you can always tell who is talking. Whereas the sometimes harder bits for me is when you do have in Moon Knight.
Yes.
I think it's always the same, and I'm like, okay, so which characters? That's no, don't.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Bemis does address that, I think, with a little bit where you see apparitions kind of behind or next to, whoever it is at the moment, Stephen Grant or Mark Spector. But yeah, no, totally agree with you as well. And it would be very tropey, Chris. I don't want to use that word in front of you, but it would be very tropey to have the old 70s thing with Jake Lockley with his big mustache and his handicap hat. And then you have Stephen Grant with his dapper suit. It just gets a little too on the nose that these guys are different when they're just totally different looking. But it's an interesting article, and give it a read, loonies. We'll put it in the show notes as well. There's a couple of other things as well I just wanted to touch upon. I just found this out tonight. There's another podcast called Epic Marvel Podcast. And this is brilliant. I'm going to do this immediately after this recording, Chris. There's an interview with Bill Sienkiewicz on Moon Knight on their podcast. They interview him as well. And I went onto their podcasty, page thing. And only a couple of weeks ago, they have an interview with Doug Moench, who, as all loonies know, is one of the forefathers of Moon Knight history. He started it all, kick-started it all in the 70s and 80s. There's an interview with him, and a couple of episodes before that, there's like a special on Moon Knight. So I think I've hit gold here. So loonies, I've got no shame in shouting out these other podcasts, but please check out Epic Marvel Podcast. I'll put it in the show notes as well. And you can see interviews of Bill Sienkiewicz and Doug Moench as well. Finally, as well, this is a little thing. It's always quite tentative. I always find it quite tentative to do. I come across the issue 192 preview pages. So there's about 6 pages of previews for Moon Knight's next issue, which will be released, I think, next Wednesday. And if anyone who's been reading the current run knows, there are a lot of matzo balls hanging up in the air there that just need to be resolved. So if you really want to, just can't wait for Wednesday and just want to get those questions answered, I'll post it up in the Facebook group as well, the pages. I haven't myself looked at it because I don't want to be spoiled. We're too close to Wednesday, so I think I can wait for Wednesday. But anyway, they're there for you if you want to have a look. And I'll put a spoiler thread through, so if you want to drop your comments in after Wednesday, I'll be having a look at it, and we're getting into discussing as well. Chris, are you following the Bemis and Morrow's latest run at the moment?
I'm waiting, as I was saying, I'm doing a lot of my collections now in trade paperback, I'm waiting until I can get all of the series together. I've been, unfortunately, I should say, when I'm not directly reading issue by issue, I will every now and again look at some of the previews. I'll read some of the articles about that run. So I kind of have an understanding of where things are at the moment and who's who, without the overall rationale reasoning of why everything is happening. So I've seen some of the larger shock awe factors that you've had, or the retcon. Is it really retconning when they basically decide that your character has been, or the persona of your character has been around for thousands of years? I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting
retconning, is it?
No, but that's an interesting. That's one of those things that was funny because it kind of ruffled a few feathers there. But you think about it, and well, for me, it seems logical. It's kind of like a legacy character, like your Black Panther, like your Ghost Rider or your Iron Fist. Of course, there would be like, what would be the reasoning that Khonshu would only pick Mark Spector, in the 70s and 80s to become an avatar of vengeance? It's a mantle. So yeah, I don't think it's a retcon.
No, and I like the idea. As you said, we had the Spider. No, what was it? The Marvel 1 billion. 1
billion BC. Yeah, 1 million BC. Yeah.
Where it was talking about where you saw the original, like one of the original Black Panthers. So the original kind of Strange, or Sorcerer Supreme, I should say, before John kills me. So I really like that, and that's how I saw it when I heard about this. Yeah, when I heard about this, as you say, this divisive story piece, I was like, yeah, no, it makes sense. It really does. Once you understand that there is a whole god element, a Khonshu element to the Moon Knight, and that is more than, as I said, a Batman for the Marvel Universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
when you understand there's the whole mythology behind it, and that there's the Avatar of Ra and all that sort of thing, I was like, okay, yeah, no, I like this idea.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to when the whole collection comes out.
Yes.
That being one of my weekends where I just sit down for a day and just kind of go run through as many of them as possible.
Yeah, no, for sure. It is good. It was a good thing that they did. And what I enjoyed about that was that they didn't linger on it too much, because I think they've done many stories where they do that. They go into it. So I'm glad that Bemis flagged it, which is good. And it kind of made sense, and everyone's kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. That's cool. Whether or not he goes back into it, we'll see as well. Look, there's plenty of stuff in there, Chris, to really love when you do pick up the trade eventually. But yeah, I think he just flagged it, and that's it. And like we move on, and it informs a bit of it as well, because like he's trying to build up this whole thing with Amun-Ra, with the Sun King being a eternal, immortal enemy to Moon Knight, which makes sense because sun and the moon. And them being interrelated as well, but it's very cool. It's going on, and we'll be reviewing it next Wednesday. But as I said, there's a preview there for Loonies if you want to have a look at the group. I've posted it up with my eyes closed, so have a look if you want. And
spoilers beware.
Yeah, exactly, and we'll get onto it. All right, Chris. I think now, having said that, we have a couple of classic tales here to get through, and one of the massive reasons, other than the fact that you're from Defenders TV podcast, is that you're a big Spider-Man fan. For our classic run, this episode we are looking at Peter Parker, double issue, Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, Volume 1, issues 22 and 23, and with that, I think we'll go over the moon. Alright, Loonies, so we are over the moon here, and we have Chris with us from Defenders TV podcast, and a little different this time round. Chris is our guest narrator, but he's our live guest. So what I thought would be pretty cool would be that Chris can take us through the synopses. You can be the John for this episode, Chris.
Yeah, I know. I kind of feel a bit like pressure. I'm like, I've never done a synopsis before. Please God, let this be good.
Yeah, well, yeah, and please God, I hope I wrote it all right. But Chris, if I can throw it to you to give us the synopsis or the synopsis for the first issue.
Sure. See, John? See what I said there? Sure. Anyone who doesn't get that, you need to go over and check out Defenders TV podcast. Sure. Okay. So, Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, Volume 1, Issue 22, By the Light of the Silvery Moonlight, was released in September 1978 with writer Bill Mantlo, artist Mike Zeck, inks and letters done by Bruce D. Patterson, colours by George Rososos, and editor being Bob Hall. A gangland slaying is about to take place in the municipal garage beneath the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. The Magi, having informant Lindy pinned to the wall with car headlights on him and guns trained to kill, in the shadows above, Moon Knight watches and waits for his chance. It turns out a plea bargain with District Attorney Blake Tower has got Lindy in this bind. But when all is just about lost, Moon Knight swoops in and attacks the would-be hitman. With speed and strength, Moon Knight is able to neutralise 4 of the gang members, but not even the Avatar of Vengeance can stop a rain of bullets from the last gang member finding his target, Lindy. Lindy is shot and dying as Moon Knight takes care of the gunman. He dies in Moon Knight's arms, but before revealing that the Magi somehow know Moon Knight's secret identity. With him no closer to the lead on the Magi, Moon Knight disappears from the scene as mysteriously as he arrived. Frenchie and the Mooncopter assist him with his departure. Spider-Man is seen on his way home too, after an evening of crime fighting. Tired and not exactly fresh from the day's fighting, Spider-Man changes out of his costume and as Peter Parker hits the showers. A pleasant date with Betty Brandt is in store for the evening, and they soon leave Peter's apartment, but not without someone haranguing from his grumpy landlady. Although the young couple are excited for their date, both can't help but think of their ex-partners, Peter for Mary Jane and Betty for Ned. In a couple of quick-fire subplots, we see Flash Thompson with his girlfriend Sha Shen in her apartment attempting to study for his college courses. But it doesn't take long before Flash is willingly distracted by the attentions of Sha Shen. Across the city, the White Tiger, Hector Alea, laments the loss of his love, Holly Giles. It appears the powers bestowed upon him are as much a curse as they are a gift, as the White Tiger screams to the heavens for the pain he currently feels. A little later into the night, Peter Parker is suited up and swinging through the streets as Spider-Man. He chances upon Gina Diner, and his spider sense quickly alerts him to that something is wrong. At the same time, Jake Lockley walks into the diner, fortuitously for the masked man with guns who appear to be looking for him. Before they have time to react to Jake's entrance, Spider-Man swings in and the fight's on. With the help of Gina and a frying pan, Spider-Man manages to subdue the criminals, although one manages to slip out of the diner. Jake follows in pursuit and quickly changes into Moon Knight. A well-thrown truncheon trips the criminal, and Moon Knight pounces on him, showing no mercy. He's eager to show where the Big M, the leader of the Magi, is hiding. Suddenly, Spider-Man appears again and throws himself between Moon Knight and the beaten criminal. Annoyed at Spider-Man for ruining his plan, Moon Knight had intended to be abducted by the men so that he could be led to the Magi. Moon Knight strikes out and attacks the web slinger. As the two heroes battle, the lucky criminal slips away once again and tries to phone the Magi. Unfortunately for him, Moon Knight can multitask. Two crescent darts find their mark. Spider-Man won't be annoyed so easily, however, and springs into Moon Knight once again to resume the street-level tussle. It's Spider-Man who first senses it, but before any cause of action can be carried out, both Moon Knight and Spider-Man are knocked off their feet. Standing before them is Cyclone, the French assassin, and villain extraordinaire for the Magi. With the ability to conjure up small cyclones, the Magi's assassin has the two heroes at his mercy.
Yes. What a thrilling ending there for issue 22, and thanks, Chris, for the retelling, the synopsis for issue 22, By the Light of the Silvery Moon Knight. So, with this issue, it was, again, we're still hovering in the classic run, still hovering around the late 70s, early 80s. So we definitely have a flavour of the time, I guess, of this particular issue. And for loonies that are first-time listeners, what we do is we do the bare bones, which is what Chris has just done, which is the synopsis of the comic book issue. We look at four main aspects of the issue and just discuss them as to, you know, the four main points that make the story. Any notes that may occur, any fun or trivial notes that we find out along the way. And finally, we mark this out of 5 crescent darts. So 5 crescent dart ratings. So Chris, this is to me this is very synonymous, I think, with Spider-Man comics, in the fact that one of the first aspects I'll put up on show is, of course, it is a Spider-Man comic, so rightly so, we do focus on Spider-Man. There's a lot of relationships here kind of flourishing. So apart from the main story, which is basically Moon Knight trying to hunt down the Magi and Spider-Man getting in the getting caught in the crossfire, what we do see is a lot of relationships of second tier Spider-Man supporting cast. So what we have obviously is Peter kind of juggling how he's going to date Betty Brant, who we know from the movies as well. She was played by Elizabeth something or other. I know her face.
Yep, I tilted my head there.
Elizabeth,
oh my god, if he knows this one off the top of his head.
Elizabeth Banks. I think her name's Banks, right? Elizabeth.
That's it. Yeah. Yes.
So she's quite an original character from the Spider-Man lore or mythology. And it's interesting to actually see that they're both dating. As any Spider-Man fan knows, there's the two big ones. I mean, I'm a part-time Spider-Man fan. The two big ones for me, Chris, would be Mary Jane, obviously. She's like the number one. And Gwen Stacy, who unfortunately met an untimely end. But Betty Brant here, Chris, any thoughts here on... actually, sorry, before I go into that, Betty Brant... there seems to be not so much a love triangle, there seems to be a love square happening, because we have Peter Parker, who's kind of pining for Mary Jane still, and we have Betty Brant, who's pining for Ned Osborn. Is this something that's always happening in Spider-Man, Chris? Is this
So the whole relationship thing in Spider-Man is always the big one. So back in the day when he was in school, it was always about how could he juggle his life as a high schooler or college person. How can he be Peter Parker and Spider-Man? So there's always that dual identity piece. And then with both of that comes, okay, everyday relationship issues and then everyday superhero issues. So you'll always have a lot of the comics split into, okay, so if he does this with his personal life, it causes this, it cascades down, and this next thing happens. And then you'll see at the same time, when he does X on as Spider-Man, this next thing happens. And that causes, and there's sometimes overlap. So when he's being a photographer in the Daily Bugle, I was about to say Daily Planet there. Oof. Yeah. Wow. When he's there with the Bugle, you'll see that he meets Betty Brant. He's then also trained to take photos of being Spider-Man while dating Betty Brant. Yada yada yada. I was never a massive fan of her, the character, not just in general. I prefer the Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane, love of his life, kind of someone he shares his intimate secrets with, yada yada. I'm a romantic at heart. I love that, and that relationship is fantastic. The reason I loved this episode, or this issue I should say, is because this was about the time where we had Flash. And Flash was... Flash, or Eugene, was he's a character. He's along the lines of Eddie Brock, which is he's been so intricate to the whole Spider-Man mythos. Both were Venom. There's a lot to it, but the reason I love Flash is because later on he becomes the anti-hero. He actually just becomes a full-on anti-hero. Or hero as Venom, Agent Venom. And I loved that about him. So I loved seeing, rereading this and going, oh yeah, he was still back around here back in the 70s. But yeah, and then we did get to see the actual, as you said, Moon Knight. Correct me if I'm wrong, this is where they started to change him into being more the overall hero.
Yeah, yes, because he started out as pretty much a gun for hire, like a villain, basically. He premiered in Werewolf by Night, and the sympathetic character there was Jack Russell, the werewolf, and Moon Knight was hired by the committee to actually take down Werewolf by Night. So he's starting to become a sympathetic character, mind you. Prior to this as well, and we mentioned this off air as well, or chatting with you off air, Moon Knight teamed up with the Defenders in David Kraft's run of issue 47 to 51, where he teamed up with Valkyrie, Hellcat, the Hulk as well, and he started being a bit more heroic. Yeah, but he's still very much, and it's a good point because. It's reiterated in these two issues. It's very much Spider-Man's very much suspicious of him. A lot, and this is what you get up until this point. A lot of the heroes really don't know where Moon Knight stands, and it's just unfortunate that they both come together and they have a bit of a misunderstanding. They do your typical fight. Moon Knight and Spider-Man. It's great to see two heroes battle it out. Because Spider-Man thinks that Moon Knight's about to kill this unnamed criminal or assassin that Moon Knight comes across, not knowing Moon Knight's overall great plan. But it is really cool to see Flash Thompson in this as well. I think he's very much seen as very different. He's very mellowed out. Like he's actually gone to college now. He's no longer the bully, like the old-fashioned bully to Peter Parker. He's kind of grown up a little. I had notes in here as well. I saw books on chemistry and psychology. It doesn't mention what courses he's doing, but they seem quite varied. It seems like he has a stable relationship with Shashan, who, again, I have no idea who she is, but they seem to have a very nice relationship together. And what you were saying also with Betty Brant, and I find really interesting, because this is a Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man comic book, is that it's funny because, as you're saying, it's all about the relationships at the moment, how he balances that, and you very much see how he balances it as Peter Parker, but as Spider-Man, in this issue, he kind of falls into it. Like, the comic opens up with Moon Knight stalking his prey, right, and kind of following the Madger, and Spider-Man actually kind of gets caught in the crossfire with it as well. So he wasn't actively looking for the Madger or these criminals as well. He kind of has come across it as just by chance. So I think it's very different, considering that he's the titular character of the book. That he in his costume guise, he in a way takes a little bit of second fiddle to Moon Knight in that bit, but it's very much focused on Peter Parker's relationships, I think, in this issue. And it's interesting because I wanted to know your take on it, because they seem to be very relationship heavy. We see the White Tiger as well. He's on the rooftop. He's bawling his eyes out. Very emotional fella, pining for Holly Gillis, his girlfriend, who he says he can't have anymore because he's turned into the White Tiger. So there's a lot of these relationships happening. And it's quite interesting.
But you'll see this in a lot of Spider-Man, even throughout up into the 90s, where we had the Clone Saga, and there's parts in that where you'll see it comes down to the how can I be one person if I don't have this other person, or am I really X if I'm not Y? So think of it as the relationship between Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Almost even like how can I be Spider? It's seen. We'll see. You always see it. It's probably Mark Spector. How can I be Mark Spector if I'm not Moon Knight? How can I be Moon Knight if I'm not Mark Spector? Like there's all these always like there's always these different kind of elements of, and as you said, it's about that, which is relationships. So like some of the best stories, even the greatest stories of Spider-Man is nothing to do with Spider-Man. It's to do with Peter Parker.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's really, it's really integral to Spider-Man. And one of the things I felt at times with Dan Slott's run, Dan Slott, a great run with Spider-Man, and recently announced that he's wrapping up his 10-year run with Spider-Man to write Iron Man, I think, Invisible Iron Man. But he's had a great run with Spider-Man, had a great arcs here and there as well. But sometimes I felt that it missed that little element which you mentioned, which is basically that tussle between balancing Peter Parker with Spider-Man. With Parker Industries, you had Spider-Man. They were so separate, and it there was a little bit of it, where Peter had to dash away and change. But I really do enjoy that classic sense of him trying to juggle the two, and not too much in here as well. You see two sides of it, but you don't see the conflict between the two. You don't see, Moon Knight turning up with Peter Parker and him having to, turn into Spider-Man or whatever. So, it's that's quite interesting as well. One of the other aspects I put here as well is having mentioned Moon Knight and the Defenders. With actually Moon Knight now teaming up with Spider-Man, who without a doubt is a big hitter of Marvel and has always been a big hitter of Marvel, and for Moon Knight to actually actively seek out the Madger, who we know as well is a big criminal organisation in Marvel, headed by various crime bosses, most notably Hammerhead. We see now Moon Knight really now diving into the Marvel universe, and he's starting to become part of the greater universe, I think. And I put a lot of that down to him teaming up with Spider-Man and basically the Madger, which is it's no Hydra, but the Madger is quite a popular and famous criminal syndicate in the Marvel universe. So I thought that was pretty important for Moon Knight to actually be tied to those two. And as I said, it was great to see him go head to head with Spider-Man in this issue. I thought it was always fun that what they've done here is, so up until recently you'll have Moon Knight versus the Committee, and the Committee is a lower tier. Oh, very much so.
Magi.
Yeah, very much.
If you want to, like, the Committee is the businessmen.
Yeah.
Whereas what you have here is, as you say, it's one of the larger Marvel syndicates or evil syndicates.
Yeah, the big hitters. You got
that are in there.
You got Tombstone, who becomes part of the Magia as well. One of my favourite villains, Tombstone. Lonnie Lincoln. He's one of my favourite Spider-Man villains. For sure. Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, that was perfect.
No, that was it. Yeah, cool. Look, also as well, just a couple of other notes for this as well. One of the things I found, obviously, really big with Spider-Man, and one of the big aspects here, and he features in the second issue, is Cyclone. One of your over-the-top villains, and very garish costumes, and he was the big reveal at the end. Quite a highly powered criminal. I don't know too much about him. I'm assuming I do remember reading about him in the Marvel Universe Handbook ages ago when I was young, but I don't think he's a D-lister at best. He's a French assassin for hire. He has the ability to summon, very much like Storm, I guess, of the X-Men, but only limited to the velocity of winds around him. And he takes on both Moon Knight and Spider-Man, and that's where we leave it for this issue. So I guess what I wanted to ask you, Chris, as well, is that Spider-Man has had a slew of rogues gallery, of villains. I reckon second only to Batman, right? Batman has the biggest range of well-known villains. But Spider-Man, have you come across Cyclone before? This is the first comic I've actually seen him in, although I do know of him. But has he turned up in any recent runs of Spider-Man that you know of, or any runs that you've read?
No, he's kind of, as you said, he's a bit of a D-lister. I put him on levels with the Tarantula, which is kind of he's this other. Oh, he's this really silly Spider-Man impersonation guy who has big. He has spikes on the end of his feet.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
He was cool though.
But
Eric Larson. I remember Eric Larson drew the Tarantula, and he's pretty funky. And he actually featured in I think he features in Shadowland with Daredevil. He gets a bit of a resurgence. God, what was I going to say? They're very interesting characters. Very interesting.
Yeah, well, what's the trouble is we have with Spider-Man is he's been around for years. And the truth is, Spider-Man has been around for, oh God, what are we? We're looking at
60 years?
Nearly 80 years.
80 years, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's been around for. Spider-Man is a long time. Yeah, he's a long time hero.
But actually, what
fantasy is?
What you get with that, Chris, though, I find, and again with going back to Dan Slott, is that you get what I love about Dan Slott as well is that he does resurrect a lot of these D-list characters. So with God, let me get this right. With the kind of recent Amazing Spider-Man run, it had to do with the Jackal, and resurrecting all these old characters. You actually even also had, where was it? I think it was in Spider-Verse as well. You had the Carrion, one of the memorable characters. These are all D-list characters, and you had the Zodiac as well, which, funnily enough, Loonies featured in the Defenders, which we of the classic run of Moon Knight as well. So all these characters, which you don't ever think about, having a bit of a resurgence, so to speak, which is really fun to see. It'd be interesting to see if... actually, what I'm thinking now, Chris, is that I do have a small inkling... God, I've got to check this up. So any loonies, please help me. The latest Mark Waid run of the Avengers, I think numbers 1 or 2, I do believe Cyclone may have featured in it.
Oh
yeah,
wow!
so
That's...
I know, yeah. I'm delving the depths of my brain here, but I do remember Falcon and Thor, Jane Foster Thor, and Miles Morales. They fought this villain, and I think it was Cyclone, maybe in a slightly souped-up suit, but he made an appearance as well. So you get all these delisting villains, and they actually pop up because I think a lot of these writers love giving nods to the past. So anyway, yeah, I think I'll have to check that, Loonies, and I'll put that, or if anyone can correct me, please do. I'd like to check that, but yeah, Cyclone may very well feature in a more recent run.
The reason, and just kind of to wrap this up, one of the reasons I think that you'll see a lot of Spider-Man rogues being reinvented has been the amount of time that he's been around, but
yes,
also it was Lee and Ditko, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, who built a majority of these villains, and after a while, then you start getting Kane and Thomas and John Romita Jr. and you'll get some of the older, the older, I should say, the later generation of guys, but similar to what you'll see in the X-Men and what you'll see in Captain America with Bucky and the Winter Soldier and all that. What they do is a lot of later artists and writers will go back to the Steve Ditko, Stan Lee era, the golden age, and will actually go, okay, I really like that guy, I want to bring him back, because they know that they can take an aspect of these, probably back then, let's call it campy, one-dimensional to a degree, characters,
yeah,
and make them bigger, make them better. Like taking the Vulture, the Chameleon, Doc Ock, Sandman, Lizard, and building on those. So probably the same with Moonlight. Like they'll take elements of, as we talked about earlier, taking elements of the overall lore, and then moving it modernizing it, but just by adding another layer on top. Now, as we talked about, sometimes those layers piss off a lot of people. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you're like, yeah, that's fine. But the good thing is, these are comic books. They're like, if you don't like something that the writer's doing, in another year, a new writing team most likely will be part of it, and you can come back then. Or you can skip over one or two episodes, or issues, I should say.
100%. I think the lesson learned here for any comic book fans, and you do see outrage here and there and blah blah blah, but I think the lesson learned is that don't be too precious, because sooner or later, things are just going to be kind of reset and done again, and the beautiful thing about, I can't remember, I had this conversation with someone as well, and Marvel do it because it retains that tension which we all want in stories in general, not just your comic books or your titles, but in stories. People are saying, "Oh God, when are we going to get the real Thor back? When are we going to get the real Hulk back? When are we going to get the real Iron Man back?" But the thing is with Marvel and what they do, and with these characters for so long as well, you've got to mix it up. You've got to keep it fresh. So what they do is that at no particular point do they have everyone back at the norm. There's always a little inkling of someone, some extra character, still working their way through. And I think that's great. Because it keeps the interest in there with people. So,
well, actually, just to jump in here, because I think I hear like 1,000 other loonies listening to this podcast, crying out. They are, I think Marvel have, as of May, are doing the fresh start.
Yep. They are.
Where they're they're putting a lot of people back in their original spots.
Yeah. That's it. You got the big three. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have the Hulk coming back slowly now in Avengers No Surrender. You got Cap back, kind of where he was, and now we're kind of waiting for Iron Man to come back. And Marvel exactly are going to do that. They're going to they're going to bring the big three back. There's the much touted death of Jane Foster. So Jane's Foster's going to go as Thor, and we're assuming that Odinson will take on the mantle. So no, rightly so. There is going to be a back to the norm as well. What I'm wondering is though, and Wolverine coming back, the Hunt for Wolverine, he's going to be coming back. I just, I take that with a grain of salt. I wonder what else they're going to kind of just throw in the mix to make us just go, oh, we're almost there,
Yeah.
Because let's face it, marketing-wise, that's what they'll do,
Well, look, the unfortunate thing about Marvel, and let's be honest, is Marvel is a company. As much as we love and think about comics as art and stories, and Marvel is a company with a bottom line, with shares that goes into Disney, which is connected to Marvel Entertainment, which, let's be honest, also has to sell movie tickets. So they will always, as much as we want the writers to be able to really go wild with some of these characters. And this is one of the things you're lucky with Moon Knight, right? And I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but as soon as they bring Moon Knight to the MCU, they're locking in a lot of things. And I mean that in that they like Bruce Banner has to be the Hulk now because he is the Hulk in the MCU. Like, if you look at the lineup on changes that they're bringing back to Marvel Comics, is like they're bringing back all the same people that they are in the MCU. So you have Odinson being Thor, you have Eddie Brock being Venom. There's like Agent Venom is gone to a degree. You have just Doctor Strange being Sorcerer Supreme, Tony Stark being Iron Man, Peter Parker. As much as I love Miles Morales, I think they'll keep him to the side. They probably change his to be Spider-Man to very much anymore. What they're doing is bringing, as I said, bringing everything in line with the MCU. So as soon as Mark Spector comes in there, you're not going to be able to change very much about that character. Because they'll always want him close to the TV shows or the films or whichever he ends up being in.
That's a really good point, actually, and I never actually thought of that, but that is a good point. You do lock it in, and one of the things, I'm quite flexible as well. One of the things with Moon Knight is that I'd be open to seeing a reinterpretation of Moon Knight, whatever that means, whether it not be Mark Spector, whether it be someone else. One of the speculations, or speculations, as one of our loonies likes to say, is with this current run of crazy runs in the family, is that we were all kind of speculating whether there would be another legacy character, right? And I was kind of chomping at the bits that, this would be cool. Like, if Mark has a long-lost daughter or son, and they take on the mantle, that will be pretty cool, because he's the only one that has been kind of really untouched with these like revamped versions of it, and I'd love to see. We've only seen the Ultimate Moon Knight in the Ultimate Universe, and there was a small one of the loonies put it on the Facebook group. There was a version of an alternate universe, and Mark Spector's daughter, who funnily enough was called Jessica, like as if we had not had enough Jessicas in the universe. She takes the mantle of Moon Knight, and I thought, Ripper, this is really cool as well. And one of the things that we're all speculating at the moment with the recent run is that we've been introduced to Mark Spector's daughter with Marlene Dietrich, and one of the little kernels there that they leave you wondering is that apparently Dietrich named herself. So Marlene said, you can name yourself whatever you want. So we're thinking she might be Jessica. She might be this other Jessica that we later see become Moon Knight. So there are many possibilities there, but as you say though, if you do introduce Mark Spector into the MCU, unfortunately you are kind of bound by what the audience would expect Moon Knight to be. Yeah, so yeah,
Be careful what you wish for, basically. Exactly. Be careful.
Exactly.
Trust me, as a man who has had Spider-Man reinvented quite a lot. Be careful.
Yeah.
Be careful. As much as I want, and I'm put it out there, I want to see Moon Knight on the big screen or the small screen.
I'd love to. Yeah, exactly. I'll be happy anything at the moment. So just quickly going to, I think, wrapping up this issue, there are a few notes that I had here as well. So basically, I just wanted to your takes on this, Chris, as well. In the issue as well, Moon Knight uses his crescent darts and he throws them at Spider-Man, and he manages to tear the spider webs that Spider-Man is thwipping at him. Now, from my understanding of the Marvel Universe, Spider-Man's webs are quite strong. They're actually to the point where I remember a web of Spider-Man, the Hulk had problems trying to rip apart the spider webs. But we have Moon Knight's crescent darts ripping through them quite easily. An oversight, you reckon, Chris, on the writer's behalf there, or does Moon Knight have special crescent darts?
I'm gonna say special darts, but actually more likely it's an oversight. The way they always say it is Spider-Man's webs change based on his need. In other words, he changes the formula up. That's how they get around a lot of it. It's like, he used a different formula that was stronger because he knew it was facing the Hulk. Or, as you'll see in the films, it's like he changed his web fluid to make it to allow for electricity so that he could use tasers. Or then he became... At one point he had... it was actually when Ben Reilly was the Spider-Man, or the all-new Spider-Man. He had balls, web balls, like that would explode on impact. So there's always these different... But then there are ones where... Yeah, you see Spider-Man and basically someone with a knife will cut him, and you're like, what? I thought they were as hard as... Oh, okay. The way I always go, it's a comic book. Anything's possible.
Yeah. Exactly. I tend to think he changed his web formula there as well myself. I think I can't see Moon Knight doing anything extra with his crescent darts, so I'd give that to Spidey on that one. The other notes I would say, unfortunately, and this is further on to the previous episode just recently gone as well, it's another instance where Moon Knight is unable to save the innocent person. So Lindy, at the very beginning, gets mowed down by a flurry of bullets. And again, we see Moon Knight there just standing and watching as someone dies. This, unfortunately, is becoming a common occurrence with Moon Knight. So I'm wondering if he's indeed a hero at all, or he just happens to be there, have the worst luck, with him. So I found that a bit strange. Moon Knight, seeing someone else die. No spoilers, but the next issue as well, it happens again. So we'll hopefully he has better luck next time. Also, finally, I think... my other note was just Spidey doesn't seem to be with Mary Jane at the moment. He's very much with Betty Brant. But I'm assuming it's safe to assume, Chris, that won't last long.
No,
they don't.
He gets back with Mary Jane as always, and then breaks up with her, or she disappears, or it's literally the Spider-Man is always this on again, off again. So. Depending on which run you're reading, he's married to her, he's not married to her, they're dating, they're not dating. It's like Superman and Lois Lane. Let's put it that way. There's some comic books where they're married and have a kid. There's other ones where they're not.
Yeah, exactly. It's comic books here, so we've just got to roll with it. Okay, well that comes down to Crescent Dart ratings here. So look, I'll just kick off here, Chris. For this issue here, which we saw a bit of Moon Knight, we saw a bit of action as well. To be honest, I really liked the pacing of this after coming off the back of the Defenders books written by David Kraft, which Connor and I found a little slow. It might be a thing of the time. Funnily enough, this is in 1978, and for me, this rolled perfectly. This was great. I read this from cover to cover. and I enjoyed every minute of it. So I was really impressed with it. I loved seeing Moon Knight and Spider-Man go toe to toe. That's one of the things that you want with your heroes. You want to see them go against each other, against someone really big like Spider-Man. And let's face it, he's a massively powerful figure, considering his stature as a young Peter Parker. I thought the Maggia was interesting as well. So I'd like to see where that goes with the Maggia. And I love Cyclone, which is a over the top villain, which is very synonymous with Spider-Man. And I don't know, there's a level of comfort in seeing these kind of over the top villains. I think your Mysterios, your Carrions, your Vultures, your Rhinos. They just seem so over the top. There's a little bit of me that just kind of goes, oh, these guys are cool, when they're meant to be kind of scary. So I would give this. I'll give this a solid 3.5 Crescent Dart ratings. For this, I think it's definitely worth checking out, and it's only a 2-parter, Loonies. So it's not not investing too much of your time. Chris, can I ask what you'd give this issue?
I'd be 3.5 with you as well. It's as you said. Look, the pacing is better for the time that it was. Typically, they had these very long arcs of storylines, as much as they do now. Which is, I can actually see myself. I can kind of argue with myself. They were shorter back then, but they felt longer. Whereas now you can have like Civil War going on, and it could take the space of a year or half a year to kind of close up. Seeing Moon Knight in here is fantastic, and I do like what they were trying to do with Moon Knight in this. As I said, like they're trying to make him more of. This is during the time that they were reinventing him. They were explaining some of his additional backstory as, no, he wasn't just a gun for hire, he actually was a good guy, yada yada. And then what you have is, as I said, you have Thompson in there. There's the whole White Tiger subplot, which, to be honest, I can't even remember. I couldn't say I remembered reading that. No. That wasn't there. But yeah, look, I'd give it a look. It's a solid 3.5 Crescent Darts. But see, this may be your cup of tea, it may not. I know some people who don't like the 70s aspects of comic books. Some people do.
Yeah, there's a slight level of, and we've done it through the earlier runs as well. Sometimes you have to really take it tongue in cheek as well, and if you're willing to do that, then I find that you end up enjoying it a lot more. So 3.5. I totally agree with you. Moon Knight is simmering on really nicely. He's edging towards 1980, which he gets his own series, and as you say as well, Chris, it's well balanced with a typical Spider-Man issue. And I think as well, with Spider-Man being around for so long, I think the writers are very comfortable with how to write a Spider-Man comic at this stage, even in 1978. So you get a really well-paced issue, which is why I think it paces a lot better than the Defenders. All right, cool. So that was issue 22 of Spectacular Spider-Man. Now we have the second part up for review, a double header here with Chris. So again, I'll throw it to Chris for the bare bones of issue 23.
Sure. God, I love saying sure. Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, Volume 1, Issues 23. Guess who's buried in Grant's tomb? It was released in October 1978 with the artist was Jim Mooney. The inker was Mike Esposito. Colours by Phil Ranch. Letters were done by Joan Rosen, and editor being Bob Hall at the time. The Magi assassin Cyclone has Spider-Man and Moon Knight under his thumb as he tosses them like rag dolls with his cyclonic powers. As Spider-Man desperately grabs for purchase on a nearby wall, Moon Knight attempts to lunge unnoticed at Cyclone. The devious villain is too quick, however, and before Moon Knight can make an impact on his attack, he is hurled blocks away with a mighty gust of wind. With Moon Knight gone, Spider-Man rushes at Cyclone in the hope of incapacitating him. It seems the two have unfinished business. Cyclone is bitter for the webhead, and it's Cyclone who's adamant that their confrontation won't heed the same result. With both heroes defeated, there's only one final loose end to tie up, and much to the other assassin's dismay, that very same assassin pinned to a nearby payphone marked by Moon Knight's crescent dart, Cyclone puts an end to him too. Not long after Cyclone leaves the scene, Spider-Man pops up again from under a manhole. Turns out he managed to hide underground during the colossal winds that Cyclone conjured. Spider-Man discovers the dead assassin and reapproaches himself for not being able to save him. Moon Knight too reappears. Having swung back after being blown blocks away, Moon Knight calls a truce with Spider-Man, and they both agree to team up to take down the Magi. Brief moments involving the White Tiger and his lament for his love, Holly Gillis, Mary Jane Watson briefly dating an uninteresting Marty, and Betty Brant pining for her lover Ned, are briefly all covered before we return to the action with Spider-Man and Moon Knight. Still slightly wary of each other, Moon Knight offers Spider-Man a ride to his secret headquarters, that of Grand Mansion, shrouded in man-made fog. Moon Knight quickly greets Marlene before rushing out to escort Spider-Man to his command center. It's a high-tech, elaborate lair which shows Moon Knight has been tracking the Magi for some time. With a clue taken from the dead assassin and Moon Knight's scale model of New York City, the duo deduced that the Magi must be hiding in Grant's tomb, an historic monument in New York. After a quick trip in the Mooncopter, the Web-Slinger and White Eyes arrive at the tomb and peer inside. Their hunch proves fruitful as they see the Magi alongside Cyclone inside. They are waiting for Big M, their leader, and someone as yet unseen. With a little pre-planning complete, Spider-Man and Moon Knight crash into the tomb, taking the Magi by surprise. The fight is on as both Spidey and Moony prove to be a handful for the room full of cutthroats. Cyclone joins the fray, but in his haste to use cyclonic power, his winds cause as much trouble for his own men as for the two heroes. During the fracas, one of the tombs discreetly opens and in the shadow Big M lurks. He still remains a mystery as he quickly decides to avoid the conflict around him and returns to the tomb, still unseen by anyone. The Magi eventually try to escape the heroes and the strong winds summoned by Cyclone. The exits to the premises are however already locked. Spider-Man Moon Knight had seen to that before they instigated the attack. With the Magi beaten, Cyclone is the last man standing, and it's Moon Knight who has the solution. Previously, Moon Knight had consulted with Stark and had been given a counter-weapon to Cyclone. Moon Knight hurls a silver capsule at the Cyclone's feet, and the liquid gas immediately have an effect. Cyclone is disorientated at the immediate drop in temperature and rapidly heading into shock. Cyclone stumbles and then is a victim of his own contraption. He is flung hard against the wall by the whirling winds, and with a crump, he's knocked out. Another day, another victory for our heroes.
Yes, a thrilling end there to Moon Knight and Spider-Man's first team-up ever in the Marvel Universe. And it all happens at Grant's tomb. Chris, I do know that you recently visited New York from the podcast at Defenders TV podcast. Had you ever visited Grant's tomb as well, an historic monument?
I'm gonna say no. I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah,
I'm assuming it's. I've heard of Grant.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know there was a tomb in. I'm
okay.
I did not know there was a historic monument there.
Yeah, I had no idea as well. I wikied it after reading the issue as well, and it's I oh God, I hope I get this right. American loonies. I think it's from an old president or some military leader. That there's a monument of him in New York City. So apparently it's a big one. And yeah, thank you for that reading, Chris. That was pretty cool. That was it all came to a head there with Guess Who's Buried in Grant's Tomb, and we saw Moony and Spider-Man bashing it out with the Madger. But if we go into the aspects of it here, there are a few of them, I thought, which were big things. The first thing would be the team up with Spider-Man. So, of course, from last issue, it's been established now that these guys are working together. Moon Knight, who wanted to take down the Madger, has now Spider-Man on board, and Spider-Man, being the hero that he is, says, "Okay, yep, I'm with you. Let's take these guys down." And they want to take down the Madger. So, Spider-Man and Moon Knight, although their relationship is still very tenuous, because throughout the comic you have both of them thinking in the thought bubbles, I really don't trust this guy. What am I doing? Can he really be, is he really working for the Madger, or is he a genuine fella? So you have both of them questioning whether they are both, I guess, heroes. And one of the big things is that Moon Knight actually brings Spider-Man to Grant Mansion. So this is the first time that we actually see, Moon Knight invite any superhero from the Marvel Universe to his own abode. Previously, again, with the Defenders, we see Moon Knight kind of fluttering about New York and kind of mixing it with the heroes. This is the first time that he's actually taken Spider-Man, a big hitter, back to his place to show him his lair, which we find out is more of a, again, I hate to say it, more of a Batman-esque kind of superhero lair, where we see Moon Knight. He's obviously been tracking down a lot of the criminal syndicate in the city, and he's targeting the Madger, and he has a full-scale model of New York City in his headquarters. So we see what I found was the big aspect was actually this slow integration of Moon Knight into the Marvel Universe. It's another step now that he's actually ingrained in the universe. But yeah, Chris, what did you think of these two guys kicking it off together?
So the one bit about this series that you'll always find is, okay, they wanted to introduce Moon Knight to this, to be fair, the Spider-Man audience. They wanted people to go, "Ooh, that's really interesting. I'm going to go read about this guy in the 2-in-1s or the 1-and-2s." I can never remember which way they call it. The 2-in-1, the Marvel Spotlight.
2-in-1s, yeah. 2-in-1s, yeah.
Yeah. Like, Grant really wanted this character. Stephen Grant really wanted this character to be someone. So basically, what they did was, do you know what we'll do? We're going to throw in as much as possible into this issue. So let's bring him back to the base to show off that. Let's show off the mansion. Let's show off the copter. Let's show off everything that we can. So it feels a bit like one of those Origin-esque issues. Excuse me. One of those Origin-esque issues where you see, basically they throw everything at it and go, "Oh, look, you're going to like this guy because of this. So, it's good, and I like the team up that we have here, in that you do see that they're not going to do, well, they did in the 60s, the Spidey copter, the Spidey bike.
Yeah.
The Spidey cave. Like, you're not going to see those things. But, this is the detective side of Mark Spector, the mercenary side that actually is quite useful. So I enjoyed that element of the team up. But as you said, like, it's kind of it's not the Batcave.
No, it isn't.
There's an element to it where they were kind of like, check it out, he's got his own copter, he's got his own cave, mansion.
I totally agree with you. I think there is a little bit of that as well. There's a little bit of we can't help but kind of fall into that kind of, I guess, trope of a billionaire person with a secret identity, and they've got a huge lair underneath their mansion, as well. But I think exactly what you're saying, that they do. It is kind of like a who's who of Moon Knight, right? They are throwing things at him, at the reader. And previously, it's funny because I think there has been a steady simmer with Moon Knight, and I think Marvel were doing it really well at the moment. I don't know whether it's because they're tentative about the character, or whether now with Spider-Man they're a little bit more confident with the character, so they're starting to try to expand his universe to the reader. But previously, there was a really slow simmer. So if you look at, again, the Defenders books at Werewolf by Night, if you look at what we just had last week with Sean from Only the Valiant talking us through the Hulk magazine, which there was a backstory with Moon Knight in it as well. Not much is revealed from Moon Knight. He's still very mysterious, right? And it's only with Spider-Man and these two issues that... sure, I mean, we get little snippets here and there, but they're really kind of, as you say, throwing it at us now, saying, okay, they're trying to put the pieces together for Moon Knight, and for any reader, it's like, okay, this is what you're going to get, He's pretty much a millionaire guy with a moon copter and a secret lair. So, it seems that they're, and this is 1978, October 1978, and we all know, loonies out there, that 1980 he was granted his first own solo title series. So we're not far from that, So it seems that there's enough interest generated for Moon Knight, and it seems that Marvel is slowly gaining confidence that this character will actually work. And I think exactly as you say, that we are really seeing it now with Spectacular Spider-Man, that they're really starting to flesh it out. At this stage, with Doug Moench, and we do know it from hindsight, he still has no idea what's going on with Moon Knight. There's no Egyptian mythology, there's no backstory yet about him being a merc, there's none of that. None of that's invented yet. At the moment, all we've got is a dude in a white cape and a white costume that can kind of, he can fight, and that he's got a lot of money. That's all we know. So they're kind of building Moon Knight as we go, and I think that's that's what you definitely see from these two issues here.
Yeah, it's as you said, the Doug and Bill run, what was 2-3 years later.
Yes,
and it wasn't they didn't. They kind of, I think later the next year they gave him the kind of partial backstory, as you said in the Hulk one, the preview issue. Where they introduce Randall Spector.
Yes.
Yes. Or Shadow Knight.
I think it was just Randall. You're right, not Shadow Knight. But I mean, Randall is Shadow Knight, but I think it was purely Randall Spector. You're right. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But then in the 80s is when they really did here's a proper origin story. Here's Bushman. Here's everything else in between. So at this point, it's hey, we have this idea for a character. Let's put him in these different things. So the Hulk, the previews, the different crossovers where we're okay, it makes sense to put him here because I think this could work, and then we'll build a piece of the story there until where 2 years later they've done enough of that where it's hey, we can get 38 issues out of this on our own run.
Yeah. And let's face it as well, with the Hulk magazine, off the back of their successful TV show, they've introduced Moon Knight in the Hulk magazine because hoping to kind of approach a new audience. And if you think about it as a marketing strategy, it's very clever, because then why not, off the back of that, team him up with one of the biggest hitters in the Marvel Universe, Spectacular Spider-Man, give him more exposure as well. And I mean, it seems to work, because a couple of years after that, he gets his own series. So it seems that they were pushing for it, but they went down the right avenues to actually get him exposed and get some interest in him. So so that's very historically, it's quite interesting actually in this issue. Another big aspect I think of this issue, and one that has to be kind of called up, is the Big M. Now, I haven't actually investigated further beyond this issue as to who this Big M is. At the end of the issue, this issue 23, we still don't know who Big M is. We see him kind of coming out of the coffin, and then seeing that there's a whole fight happening with Spider-Man and Moon Knight and all the Magia, that he goes, okay, well, I'm just going to stay in my coffin here, like, you know, they didn't see me, and I'll just bide my time. So, we still don't know who the Big M is, and look, again, it's happened ages ago, so I will go into the Wikipedia and I'll check it out, and I guess we'll all discover who it is. But this is quite intriguing, because in this episode, although this ties up the two-parters, we still don't see the big boss of the Magia as well. So I find that quite interesting, because I always associate Hammerhead and Hammerhead with the Magia as well, but it's definitely not him. It's a Big M. Any thoughts, Chris, as to who that might be? Like, you know, without spoiling it, or without... Have you checked it out? No, do you know?
If I'm remembering correctly, I think I know who it is.
Do you? Yeah.
I think, but I'm kind of...
Chuck it out there.
I don't know.
It's not Magneto, that's for sure.
No. Hold on. So, if it was the I think it was the Hammerhead from back to the
really?
in the Hammerhead family.
Okay.
I think I'm wrong with that.
Maybe. Hang on.
Hold on.
All right, let's both have a look. Look, you know, the suspense is killing me, so I don't care, Loonies. You're just gonna have to wait. Let's give it a go. Spectacular. Spider-Man. I'm not a good typer, so this may take a while. Issue 20. What do we look at? 24 then.
Okay, hold on.
You got it. Yeah, you're a lot.
Okay.
Who is it?
There's two. I don't know who this one is. So it's either Count Nefaria or it's Madame Mask. So both of them at different points have been the Big M.
Okay.
And I don't know. I'm assuming it's Count Nefaria in this one, which is founder of the Nefaria crime family. So I'm assuming.
Well, he definitely looked male in the shadows. I mean, unless they were misleading us totally. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, that's him. And he was then he was the leader until his initial defeat by the Avengers, or so says Wikipedia.
And look, hey, for any loonies out there as well, they'll be happy to know Count Nefaria featured in Brian Michael Bendis' Moon Knight run, the very divisive run, which a lot of loonies hate, a lot of loonies love, but Count Nefaria was the main villain there, the big bad. So, hey, we've got a bit of a connection there, loonies. There we go. So he
that's probably why they did it then.
Yeah, that could be
interesting.
Yeah, B&B decided to use him as a very throwaway character. So there you go. Okay, all right.
Interesting. Well, okay, I was completely wrong. I know Hammerhead was.
Yeah.
He was a leader of the Magi at some point, or I'm pretty sure. But,
okay. Oh yeah, no, he is.
Let's
definitely.
Wait and see.
He was a main guy. I always thought. And you see it with if you look at the online games, Marvel Alliance and all that, you have Hammerhead as the leader of the Magi. Wanting to touch upon the games and stuff. He's very much synonymous with it, and he's in the latest Defenders as well. I think he was resurrected by the Hood. There's a lot of things happening with the criminal syndicate in New York City at the moment in Marvel. It's pretty messed up at the moment with Black Cat as well. Like Black Cat has a big hold on stuff, and of course Kingpin with the in Daredevil. So there are a lot of crime bosses lingering around. So with that, we've got... let me think. There's a couple of other issues here, a couple of other aspects. I thought... they're not really aspects. I think they're more like notes, really. What I wanted to mention was the Stark tech. And even back in this day, in 1978, we get a bit of Tony Stark tech that saves the day. And although, this was pre-Robert Downey Jr., although this was pre-MCU friggin' status being so good and all that, Iron Man, Tony Stark saves the day here. So what we have is Moon Knight approaching Stark off screen, and Stark giving him a silver capsule that will be used against Cyclone, and we see it towards the end, where Cyclone is, being your typical mindless villain, just starting to throw cyclones everywhere. And what happens is that Moon Knight throws this capsule at his feet. It changes the temperature. It disorients Cyclone. He gets basically a little flustered at the whole thing, and he falls down unconscious, and there's your win. So Stark Tech comes through here. I'm just wondering, Chris. Yes, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just wondering. Yeah, I'm just wondering Stark Tech, because we're not. This is not 2008. This is not Robert Downey Jr. This is actually quite an uncommon thing, I think, because let's face it, Iron Man back in the day was seriously, I think, a B or C list character. I think Robert Downey Jr. has a lot to take credit for bringing Iron Man up in the fold. So to me it was surprising to see that Stark Tech actually saved the day here, albeit a very dodgy way of beating a villain. This is the 70s after all.
Yeah, but they needed the cliche of, oh my god, we just have a pill that's just going to save the day.
Yeah,
it's always the same. But Stark Tech was, even back then, was one of the most... that's how they got around a lot of things. It was like, it's how all of a sudden, like, bad guys had laser weapons because of they managed to steal Stark Tech. So it was a plot device that they could easily dip into, because they, similar to what they've done in the MCU, which is all the futuristic stuff is either built by Hammer or Stark or XYZ. Like there's only a 3 or 4 major, the like Ronson. I'm forgetting one major one now.
Oh, you mean I
was just going to say, like, there's always like these 4 kind of 5 major tech companies, and they always have a certain piece of technology. So having Stark Tech in here, and what they're building up in this is that, hey, Moon Knight is a millionaire. He's able to buy prototype Stark Tech on what somehow, and that's how they're going to do it. Or I don't. Or they're saying that he has a relationship with Iron Man directly.
Well, I think it's the latter, Chris, as well, because there was a tenuous relationship, and it's one of the early issues that Connor and I reviewed, and it was an Iron Man comic book, and it was a little story where Tony Stark and Stephen Grant, the identity of Moon Knight, both billionaires, they go and they inspect this underwater facility, and they anyway they kind of end up forming a little bond, together because because they're both rich boys, and they both end up saving the day. So yeah, I tend to think it's probably the latter with Stephen Grant's or Mark Spector's ties or affiliations with Tony Stark. So it's just it is strange. As you mentioned, I think you were alluding to Roxxon and the stuff like AIM, even AIM as well, Advanced Ideas Mechanics. Yeah. They're the big ones that that do stuff. But yeah, I mean, I found it strange as well. I think during this time, I think the head honchos would probably be Reed Richards from the Fantastic Four, still always seen as a genius, right? Back in that day as well.
Yeah.
Tony Stark, yeah, he is very much a genius as well. I wonder if Hank McCoy would still be floating around there as your scientist kind of thing. But
he's the scientist in the 70s, but he's not really. He wasn't even the Blue Beast by that point. He's just he's Hank McCoy. Yeah. But when you've got like 40,000 geniuses around,
I know.
It's
yeah.
we can just pick this guy or this guy or this guy.
Exactly. So it's funny, like how Marvel do it now. They kind of take the piss out of it because it's Amadeus Cho. I'm the sixth most smart person in the planet, and then you got like Moon Girl as well. Like she's the best now. I think. So So Stark Tech was pretty cool and quite crucial in Moon Knight and Spider-Man winning and beating the villains at the end of the day. I thought also a couple of notes here. I thought we got to see Moon Knight's underwater entrance again, which I always find hilarious. I think it's the writers, although it wasn't Doug Moench. Who was it? It was Bill Mantlo trying to keep this mythology happening. And anyway, I think Doug Moench introduced this whole fact of Moon Knight having an underwater entrance into his mansion. So he dives into the pool next to Grant Mansion, and he comes out in a pool which is in his bedroom, and always, more often than not, Marlene is there. So I just think it's a hilarious way. I think they'll be trying to find a way to make something different than the Batcave. How can we do it? And yeah, let's have him dive in a pool. So Moon Knight, we know, is a very good swimmer. That's all I know. Because he's going to have to do that. And as far as I know, no one has followed him through the underwater passage. So the other notes as well I put on was the first time that we see Moon Knight introduce someone to his lair, which we discussed about. Another funny one here, Chris, I thought that, and I think it's a little bit of a slight on the writing. So there's a massive clue that's revealed that reveals to Spider-Man and Moon Knight of where the Maggia are meeting, right, which is Grant's tomb. So how do they find out that it's at Grant's tomb? Well, Spider-Man picks up a pamphlet from that dead assassin that we see at the very beginning of the issue, and as we go through, Moon Knight invites him to the lair. Moon Knight has a scale model of the city. Okay, bear with me. Spider-Man's looking at it, going, yeah, cool, that's pretty cool. There's your Empire State Building, there's your blah blah, there's your Woolworths Building. Oh, Grant's tomb. That reminds me of the pamphlet that I took from the guy. Hang on, this pamphlet is telling us this is where they're meeting. A little dubious, do you think, Chris, to actually put the two together, connect the dots? I think so.
Come on, it's like you always have and this is the one thing I'm so glad that I am born and living in my current state, because at least the writing in these days is be it if you love an issue or an arc or don't like an arc, at least you can say the characters and the storylines are a lot more realistic. It's just, but in this, it's like they needed to get to the next point. So it's like, oh, do you know what? Oh, look, oh my god, that's a really cool picture. Oh my god, Grant's tomb. Well, do you know what? I saw this one guy, and on the floor beside him, there was a pamphlet. And what, like, it's like, do you remember the jokes in Austin Powers? Just about these, like, you have all these henchmen, and they were telling the story behind the henchmen we never knew about. But then also, there's like, oh my god, there's this really handy clue right here beside that, and you're like, yeah, that's how they did it back then.
Yeah.
Although, okay, you had Quincy and Murder, She Wrote doing a slightly better job. But overall, it was, in comic books, it was like, look at this dead man. Oh my god, he's holding the name of the person who killed him right there. Well, what do you know? Let's go fight that person.
Yeah, I'm just like nodding and totally agreeing with you here, Chris. It is funny, and reading a lot more of these older comics, these Bronze Age comics. Look, I do love them because they're a thing of its time, and again, like I said, if you understand where it's coming from and just take it with a bit of tongue-in-cheek, you can have a lot of fun with it. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Today, this day and age, with the writers, a lot more savvy, a lot more, I don't want to say it, but a lot more thought into the details of it. I mean, because let's face it, it does wear it on its sleeve back in the 70s. It's obvious that these guys are kind of just coming up with quick ideas, quick fixes and stuff. The plot lines this day and age, a lot more intricate and a lot more well thought out. But that's not to say that we should poo-poo the Bronze Age comics.
No.
They're fun. They're fun. They're good. Yeah,
they are, and they're history. That's the thing. It's
exactly.
Like, we wouldn't that every.
Yeah, we wouldn't get to where we are today if we hadn't gone through all that sort of stuff. So, so it is just a thing of that time. It's very much a zeitgeist thing, but totally agree with you there. It's it is what it is. But you can't help but pick it up when you do read it again, like now, we're reading it for a review, and you can't help but go, oh, that is a bit dodgy,
Yeah.
You got to flag it,
As listeners on Defender Steve podcast will know, I am a stickler for tropes on TV.
Yep.
And that's why you've mentioned tropes a few times in this episode.
Yeah.
I hate them. I really do. When I'm going back in history and reading these older ones, I'm okay with it, because I'm like, the reason they're a trope now to me and to other people is because they were used in history, used back in the day so often. But there really is sometimes when you'll see these things, you go, oh, no, just no. I know why you're doing it. I understand, Mr. Writer, but give us a bit more. I suppose the best way of putting it is credit, that we can connect dot A and dot B. But as you said, and so perfectly, this is history. We would not be where we are today without. The Moon Knight would not have his own series. Spider-Man would not have his own series if they had not done what they did in the past that brought us to this point.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Look at it as a really weird uncle or auntie or member of the family,
grandmother.
That you just grandmother. Like, you have that really weird relative that you're like, look, I know why what you're. Yeah, actually, it's your racist grandmother. That's the way of thinking. You know that grandmother or granddad who says that really racist thing, and you're like,
everyone kind of oh,
you can't say that now, but we know you're from a different age, so it's okay. Okay. That is the best way to look at these historical things, where you're like, oh, back in the day you couldn't do that. You could do it then, but not now. Yeah.
Do you just?
I now have the ultimate way of saying that. Perfect. That's fantastic. Now I know how to explain about the Bronze Age comic books. The racist grandmother.
But it's funny. I do wonder as well, because just quickly, I know having listened to a lot of your podcasts as well, definitely yourself, John, and Derek are very savvy with the cinematic side of things, and I always wonder as well, what you must have a cinematic background, because you do pick up things on, like on special effects or how things are paced and beats and stuff. You talk about that a lot, and I wonder if you were to watch an old movie as well, do you get the same sort of feelings, right, with an old comic? Do you kind of look at it and go, oh god, that's really cheesy and not done, or do you go, okay, well, that is what it was of its time, and I appreciate that. And do you do that with cinema as well?
I do. I actually, in the last 2 days, I've rewatched the Ocean's 11, 12, and 13 Steven Soderbergh ones, and okay, they're still in the thousands, the early 2000s up to the mid 2000s, and there's still elements of that where you're like, oh no. But then if you go back to Raimi and go as far back as Evil Dead 1 and 2,
yep,
there's elements of that where you're like, well, you couldn't do that today, but I love it for what it is.
Yes.
Go back as far as Hitchcock, and go back as far as the original Blair Witch. Like, there's some elements in classical films where you accept them for what they are. but or other times when you go back and watch certain ones that aren't classics, but you enjoyed when you rewatch them. You're like, that's not what you wanted. But overall, it's still it's fun. You're watching it for a reason. So, like, if you ever watch the Looney should watch the 70s Captain America film, or yeah, exactly, or the Trial of the Incredible Hulk.
Oh God, really?
Or where you have Daredevil and thing, or Thor. And
yes,
the Hulk.
I love that.
Like,
yeah.
It's really, like, actually the Fantastic Four film, the original, like before the reboot with Jessica Alba and stuff, and that are now Captain America. Like, there are some, there's some clangers in it, or okay, I'll give you one final example. There was a Justice League of America TV pilot made, which had Starfire and the Green Lantern and the Blue Beetle and the Flash, but it was made as they were all living in the same house, kind of like the real world. For the loonies who don't know the real world, it was like a reality TV where they'd follow them around, but then interview them, and they'd talk about it. So it was that style. Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad. But it's so bad it nearly comes back to exceptional. It's just like, it's so bad, but so good. That's the way I think of. Sometimes the storylines are so bad, you're like, but sometimes they become so bad that they're so good.
Yeah, I think totally as well. And I think that's a lesson probably that we have to take away from this as well. Cinematic or any kind of in medium, I think in art as well, like comics. Definitely you have to understand the context of its time as well, and appreciate it for what it is back then as well. You know, what they had. You know, they obviously don't have the CGI tech that we do now. It's fine, but they made a way. You know, they made do with it. And if I do make another example with the movies as well, plenty of movies that have upstaged a lot of even recent films now as well, because they use, old-fashioned special effects, which kind of work really well, as opposed to like now you look at some movies and it's like very CGI heavy. And I remember like just some of your comments, Chris, like in a lot of some of the Defenders shows as well, saying that it's very obvious when it's CGI and it gets a bit tiresome because it's so kind of fake looking, that sort of stuff, and we look back on it later on, I guess down the track, and you would. I don't know, when technology improves even more, you look back on it as well and you go, okay, well, it wasn't the best, but you can see what they were kind of doing. You can kind of see in between the lines of what they want to do. I get that very much with the Spawn film. I don't know if you ever watched the Spawn film.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God, that is terrible, isn't it? Like, it's terrible if you look at it now.
But it's so good at the same time.
It's like watching a dodgy, I don't know, like the special effects were so archaic. It's so funny. But anyway, that's, lessons learnt for Bronze Age comics. Chris, let's go to Crescent Dart ratings for this. Okay, so this was part 2, and for me it was admittedly, obviously wrapped up the arc. It was good to see Spider-Man and Moon Knight together as well. Look, I gave 3.5 for the last one. I would have to say I wouldn't be more likely to give it a 3. I think slightly less. I know you should probably be giving more for the second part because it's meant to really you're meant to rush home and finish the story. But for me, I don't know, it was a bit tenuous having the Stark Tech come in to save the day. It was great to see the Spider-Man and the Moon Knight team up happen, and and towards the end, you have them planning. So Spider-Man spins that huge web in one of the one of the egress points. Moon Knight puts his truncheons in the other egress point. So, a lot of planning. Very cool. Very, very cool. But, Big M, still really didn't see him. There were a lot of things hanging up in the air for me. So, from a Moon Knight fan, not venturing into issue 24, because he's not in that, it kind of left things a few things up in the air for me. So, with that, it wasn't total closure. So I'll give it three crescent darts for this. How about yourself, Chris? Being a Spider-Man fan.
I'm gonna be hovering around the same. I'm not gonna lie. I think I said 3 to 3.5 for the last one. I'd be slightly less, and it's just because this is what these back in the it'd be around the same. I think then, because these are what these were back in the day. You had these long Peter Parker arcs where you have that storyline going, but there's these villain of the week type, or in this case villain of the month style issues where they within 2 or 3 issues, sometimes 4, they'd do a whole mini arc where you'd have the Big M, or who is the Big M, or a quick team up. So that's what they were about. So yeah, look, I can't give it more. This is no Clone Saga. This is no.
Yeah.
This is nothing like the Secret War or the Infinity Gauntlet or something where you're like, oh my god, this is some of the best writing in the world. This is what it was, which was a short, quick team up. But it did show that even though they didn't trust each other fully, you have Spider-Man being brought to the lair. Or to the headquarters, not the lair.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. Yeah. Oh, look, and I think that's a very important thing from a Moon Knight fan as well. As mentioned before, I think it has paved, or it has taken massive steps for Moon Knight to finally get his series, which we see in 1980 and onwards. So I think from a Moon Knight point of view, it's a very important. These 2 issues are very important in the fact that they team up with a big hitter, Spider-Man, to kind of get him that exposure, and he holds his own against him, and he's mixing it with Imager as well, which are another big syndicate in the Marvel universe. So, yep. So I think I think average, Chris, then it's probably a 3.25 for both issues, I think, as an average, which is nothing to slouch at. It's that's pretty good. It's like what, 7 out of 10, 6.5. That's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and so look, if the loonies are going to this and expecting Bendis or Ellis level of writing, you don't.
Yeah.
But if you want to, as what this is about, diving into the history of your characters and also getting a taste of the history of some Spider-Man stuff. You're not getting some of the best. You're not getting the best work, but you're getting a taste and flavor of what the character used to be.
Yeah, no,
that's the best way I can put it.
No, exactly, and look, from the outset as well, I did say that these are, I mean, even by modern standards, pretty reasonably paced as well. So a lot of the Bronze Age stuff, it can be bogged down in text and stuff. I'd recommend these loonies if you do want a fun read. I mean, they do kind of seem to pace themselves, and you flick through the pages quite well. So the pacing, there's not a problem with it, and there's enough action in there for me. I'm a big action man, Chris, so I always need a bit of action in there. I don't mind the old relationship, problems and dramas as well. But fighting Cyclone is quite a cool thing to do. So yeah. So, there you go, loonies. Issues 22 and 23, given roughly about, 3 to 3.5 crescent dart ratings. So, fantastic. So I think that pretty much wraps it. Chris, thank you so much for coming on board as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. Man, look, I could talk your ear off for another few hours. I'm being totally sincere that. I know you're saying as well that you can... what did you say? You can talk to a wall? You can talk a wall off? I can...
If a wall had ears, I'd talk to it.
If a wall had ears, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, I reckon you've been an absolute pleasure to have on here. Really good insight into your Spidey knowledge as well. Uh, I'm really excited in the fact that you're delving into a bit of Moon Knight as well. So I'll be at your ear, keeping at you with Moon Knight recommendations. So yeah, I hope you stay on in our Facebook group. Totally. Next phase.
Oh, I will.
Yeah. Yep. Next phase. Oh, actually, before I go into next phase, and further to what we were just saying, we have a bit of a crossover, don't we, Chris? So, Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast, we are crossing over with Defenders TV podcast, which have so graciously rebranded themselves only for the time being as the Doctor Strange Defenders TV podcast. And we are also teaming up with the Inner Demons, a Ghost Rider podcast, and Sons of the Dragon, an Iron Fist podcast. So this is so cool. This is one of the big events I've been looking forward to this year. All four podcasts coming together to review the whole of the Damnation event by Marvel, headed by Donny Cates and Nick Spencer, with art by Rod Reese. And we are, between the four of us, covering the core books, which are Damnation 1 to 4, and all the tie-in books as well. So the Defenders boys are taking on the Doctor Strange element, which I think is issues 386 onwards. We have Inner Demons doing Johnny Blaze, Ghost Rider 1, and Sons of the Dragon doing the Iron Fist contingent. One of the things I did mention to you, Chris, just briefly before we started, Moon Knight, we're taking on the Scarlet Spider tie-in books. A little bit of a stretch, hence the title of this episode, The Spider and the Moon, but we're looking forward to it. I do understand that you have a bit of knowledge with the Scarlet Spider as well, Ben Reilly. In a nutshell, how would you describe describe his journey so far?
So the Scarlet Spider has been a product of the 90s, where Marvel tried to reinvent a lot of their characters. So with this came the Clone Saga, with multiple Peter Parkers running around. Ultimately, one would become Kane, one would become the Scarlet Spider, and i.e. Ben Reilly, and the third being Peter Parker. And there was a whole crisscross of who was the actual real Peter Parker, who were the clones. All this done by Warren, I'm going to say Alice, but that's wrong, which was the Jackal. And you had Ben Reilly, who thought he was the clone for a time, wanting to do something well. He wanted to be a hero, so he basically took the hoodie, which had a blue hoodie with a black spider on it, and became this kind of quasi Spider-Man called the Scarlet Spider. Then later on, the arc took it that he was actually the real Peter Parker. So he later then became Peter Parker, and he stayed Ben Reilly to a degree, but he became this Spider-Man. So he took on, and there was this really cool all-new Spider-Man where he took elements of the Scarlet Spider and the Scarlet Spider suit. So a lot of people may remember this as the web shooters were on the outside of his costume. They had the kind of ring of he had a ring of web fluid on the outside with the shooters. He had the suit, which was a mix, as I said, but had a big, huge black Spider-Man, or black spider on the front and the back. Very cool, very iconic. It continued on, then it turned out that Peter Parker was the real Peter Parker, blah, 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 blah. So he disappeared, he came back, he disappeared, and now he has this newer series where you do have you have Kane being his own character. You have Ben Reilly back being the Scarlet Spider, and then you have Spider-Man. So they've kept all three of them. I'm interested to see how they bring the Scarlet Spider into the damnation overall. Because, yeah, Spider-Man's never been huge on... the Spider-Man... I was going to say he's never been huge on the magical, but there are... I can hear people screaming going, yes, there is some major ones that are like Mary Jane related, Aunt May related, which includes the supernatural. So I'm interested to see where the damnation crossover, how this brings in this character. I will be brutally honest and say some of the newer work I'm less up on in terms of the new Scarlet Spider stuff. But I'm interested to see. I'm going to be doing a quick crunch back on Marvel Unlimited to try and lead me into this.
Yeah, I think we will as well have to do that as well. We've got to get ourselves reacquainted or up to date with the Scarlet Spider at the moment. I only know geographically that he has been in Las Vegas, which is where the whole damnation thing is set. I don't know where the connection is with the mystical side of things, but it makes sense that he's in Las Vegas. And you know, speaking to our other high priests like Rebecca as well, saying that he's very much set in Las Vegas. So I can see the connection there. But yeah, I'd be interested to see how he tackles on the likes of Mephisto as well. So it'd be very interesting. I'm only hoping that that Moon Knight features in a lot of these Scarlet Spider issues as well. So we'll see how we go. So there you go, Loonies. A crash course with Scarlet Spider from Chris from the Defenders, our spider expert.
I did not use that word. You did, but I didn't. Just in case anyone ever goes, he's not an expert.
Nah.
Well, maybe.
No, well, you know a lot more than I do, so that's pretty cool. Look, hey, so next phase as well, apart from this crossover, which kicks off with Sons of the Dragon this weekend. So at the end of this weekend, Loonies, just keep your eyes out on Sons of the Dragon, and they'll have their episode reviewing Damnation 1. In the meantime, we will be heading off next week with our review of the latest Moon Knight Volume 9 by Bemis and Burrows, issue 192, which we mentioned earlier on in the news section. So there are previews up there on our Facebook group, but this is Crazy Runs in the Family Part 5. We'll do a full review of that issue. That should be very exciting. I can't wait. Wednesdays. One of the Loonies, Tommy, I think it was Tommy, said, you tend to forget when Moon Knight comes on board, and you just get excited when the new issue comes. So I totally forgot that it's actually coming around this Wednesday, and I'm totally with you. So we'll have a guest Looney as well. He's put up his hand, Corey. Corey will be narrating for us issue 192, so looking forward to that. Spectacle, our shout-outs. I would like to, again, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. It has been an absolute blast. You are fantastic to chat with. So much fun. Chris, again, is part of the Defenders TV podcast. We'll put the links in the show notes. As mentioned, Defenders TV podcast are part of the collective as well, so I'll have a link on there as well. So easy to catch up on their webpage or Twitter or Facebook page or group. Any other shout outs there, Chris, that you wanted to mention?
Just really quickly, so on Netflix, what we have Jessica Jones season 2 kicking off on the 8th of March, International Women's Day, I believe.
Not that long,
not that long. So we're gearing up here, getting ourselves ready. So make sure you come over and listen to us there. Hell, if you even just want to go do a back catalogue, there's a lot there. We recently just finished the Punisher run, and we have Black Panther review in there as well. You can find us on facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV podcast. We're on Twitter. You'll find us everywhere. We're on iTunes. We're on any good or evil podcast catcher. So you can just find us there. But I love what the boys and the High Priest of Khonshu's do here. If you have any Spidey questions, as much as I can, throw them out into the night group, and I will answer them when I can.
Yep. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris. Just one final spectacle, of course, talking about the Damnation crossover again. Please look out for Sons of the Dragon, the Immortal Iron Fist podcast. They will be reviewing Damnation issue 1. And that will be followed, I think, about a week after, from the 28th onward. The Defenders TV podcast will be reviewing Doctor Strange, issue 386, which will be a tie-in to the Damnation crossover. So, parts 1 and parts 2, we're well underway with this crossover. It's so much fun. Where you can find us, also, as always, email us on moonknightpodcast@gmail.com. We have a website, intothenightpodcast.wordpress.com. Facebook, we both have a page, ITK Moon Knight, and Facebook group. So facebook.com/groups/intothennight with a K. Twitter at ITK Moon Knight. And we are also present on Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube, Spotify as well. So just search for Into the Night with a K, a Moon Knight podcast, and you should find us, hopefully. And again, one final thing, the collective as well. It's a group of, I think, about 12 or 13 of us. Fantastic podcasts, really enjoyable. One final little thing I want to add, Chris, just before we sign off. IAYTD, I think. I am your target demographic, which is one of the collective. They have a great YouTube channel, and we were alluding a lot about Moon Knight and Batman. Okay, well, they have battles, and every Friday they do battles. And I just recently watched Moon Knight versus Azrael, which I'm sure you know.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's amazing how many similarities are between the two. So anyway, Loonies, I urge you to check out at IAYDT. I am your... Oh, sorry, the other way around. I am your target demographic. So just look up that on the YouTube and their channel. Fantastic. A lot of fun, and that's headed by Adam. So thank you, Adam, so much for providing such a great repository of information. Anyway, that's it from us now as well. Thank you so much again, Chris. Absolute pleasure. And I will sign us off by saying, may Khonshu watch over the denizens of the night. Catch you later.
See you guys.
Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.